Chapter 102. Hearing that, Yan Shishuan was full of guilt and said, "Workshop owner Su, you are exaggerating. In fact, it's all my fault. If I didn't let the Jin family mess around, there would be no such thing today. Fortunately, I saw the scene that Jin Cheng Ao attacked you with my own eyes. No matter how many reasons Jin Jintian finds, his son can't get away with it. This time, I must act impartially and give justice to workshop owner." Su Li showed a gratified smile and nodded gently. "I didn't expect that child Jin would suddenly kill me. This time, I almost passed by the gate of hell. It really makes Su Li feel scared. Since I'm fine, I won't bother you anymore. Satrap, please send me back to the school. Mammy is still waiting for me." "Okay." Yan Shishuan promised, "You have a personal mammy to take care of you. You will definitely recover faster than in my house. I'll send someone to send you back." After some arrangements, Satrap Yan watched the carriage leave and couldn't help but sigh. Workshop owner Su was about the same age as his daughter, but she was experienced in dealing with people. She didn't look like a naive girl at all. Besides, Hongxiu said that her embroidery skills were also top-notch. It was the first time for him to see such a genius. The world is so vast and full of strange things. Yan Shishuan sighed and turned back to the house. He continued to worry about the Jin family. Su Li returned to the courtyard of the school. Mammy Li looked at Su Li's pale face and shed tears. After helping Su Li lie down, she immediately went out to buy chicken, duck and fish. She was going to make soup for Su Li to nourish her body. When Ruomin, Feng Qingru and others received the news, but they didn't come to see Su Li at the first time. Instead, they chose to send tonics to let Su Li have a good rest for a period of time. It was not too late to bother Su Li when she was almost well. "I didn't expect that such a thing happened." Fortunately, Su Li was lucky and was not killed by Jin Cheng Ao. When Ruomin calmed down and said to Gong Xiangjuan, who was lying in a coma on the bed. Gong Xiangjuan moved her eyes. It seemed that she wanted to open them, but she couldn't. Gong Min smiled bitterly and said, "Grandma Wen, don't work in vain. Grandma can hear you, but she can't open her eyes or speak. Many doctors in the city have come to take a look, but none of them can explain what happened." When Ruomin sighed deeply, "This kind of strange disease is really rare. Fortunately, your grandma can still bear it. I will find another famous doctor." Unfortunately, the legendary great Dr. Qi has been missing for many years. Some people even say that he has passed away. If you can ask him for help, your grandmother will definitely be cured. Gong Min immediately felt helpless. How could she meet that kind of genius doctor just because she wanted to? Even if she met him, he might not necessarily help her. The temperament of genius doctors was very strange. After Su Li returned to the courtyard, she didn't need to hide anymore. She immediately ran the Ghost Valley meditation direction to heal herself. The Ghost Valley meditation direction deserved to be the holy book of medicine. In less than 2 days, she felt that the wounds in her body were almost healed, leaving only superficial wounds. Of course, this was also related to her innate physique. If she was still in the acquired realm, she would need at least half a month to recuperate. After the injury was almost healed, Su Li returned to the Linli building and was immediately surrounded by Fang Yuan and others. "How are your injuries?" Fang Yuan stared at Su Li's pale face and couldn't help but care about her. "It's no big deal." Su Li didn't seem to see the concern in Fang Yuan's eyes and replied lightly. Then she immediately asked about the situation of the Linli building these days. "According to your instructions, I have divided the osmanthus wine into 3 grades." When Yin Xiudong talked about the specific matters, she was full of confidence. She said, "The first grade osmanthus wine is the raw liquor with extremely high degree. Those who are weak will be drunk after 1 cup. This kind of wine is sold as a gimmick. I price a pot of 100,000 taels. The second grade osmanthus wine is the liquor after being diluted 100 times. The price is 1,000 taels. The third-grade osmanthus wine is the one we sold before. The original price remains the same. Miss Suli, what do you think? Suli nodded gently and thought for a moment. She said, well done. How much profit has the winery made during this period? 245,000 taels. Yin Shuadong immediately replied, this is the pure profit. We have earned back all the cost of building the winery. Chu Qingning, Haydn and others couldn't help but be speechless. It was too horrible to recover the cost in 1 month. Very good. Next, we should prepare for the expansion. Suli glanced at the people present and said roughly. Then she pointed to Fang Yuan and said, Fang Yuan, you stay here. Others can leave. Chu Qingning smiled and secretly gave Fang Yuan a thumbs up. He took everyone out of the adytum. Fang Yuan was also nervous. When everyone left, he couldn't help but ask, what do you want me to do here? What do you think? Suli smiled gently. Fang Yuan blushed and was slightly annoyed. He said, don't make fun of me. Okay. Suli shrugged indifferently and said, the thing about Jin Cheng Ao is not finished yet. You go to Yanzai today. So, Fang Yuan's expression changed slightly. He didn't understand why Suli was so persistent about the Jin family. Do you have to kill them all? Holding the secret letter in his hand, Fang Yuan looked up at the dim night. He thought of the lust in Jin Cheng Ao's eyes that day. Finally, he did not hesitate to disappear into the night. In the dungeon of the provincial office, begging for mercy and roaring were heard day after day. In the past 2 days, the roaring was much louder than usual. Let me out. Why do you catch me? I said that I didn't kill Suli at all. The sword hit it by itself. The burning anger in Jin Cheng Ao's eyes had already made him lose his mind. As arrogant as he was, how could he bear the word prisoner? It was inconsistent with his identity and his state of mind. The jailer impatiently scratched his ear and couldn't help but say, First Master Jin, you'd better stop for a while. If you want to prove your innocence, you should think of a decent reason. The sword hit it by itself? Do you think everyone is a fool? It's really ridiculous. What I said is true. Jin Cheng Ao roared madly, why don't you believe me? Ha 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 ha. After he said that, the jailer sneered, which made Jin Cheng Ao angrier. He didn't understand why he was so angry, but he was angry. Once this kind of anger was generated, it couldn't be stopped. He couldn't calm down and think about the problem at all. He had already understood that he must have been tricked, but what scared him was that he couldn't control his emotions at all. At this time, the sound of the prison chain came into his ears. Jin Cheng Ao sensitively raised his head and revealed a pair of scarlet eyes. Yan Zai, who came in, was shocked as if he was stared at by a beast. However, it didn't prevent him from completing the order of Mr. Li. Yan Zai showed a sarcastic smile and said, Jin Cheng Ao, I didn't expect that you would be so arrogant. Aren't you proud? Today you are a prisoner. Let's see how you can be arrogant. Yan. Zi. Yi. Jin Cheng Ao's face was distorted like a devil in hell. He was full of hatred. He struggled hard and the chains on his limbs suddenly rattled. He said, if you dare to say one more word, I will kill you. I'm really scared. Yan Zai looked indifferent and sat in front of Jin Cheng Ao. He said, I'm sitting here. Come and kill me. You are cruel and worse than pigs and dogs. It's not enough to hurt workshop owner Su. Do you want to kill me in the provincial office? Yan Zai sneered and felt very happy. Mr. Li's order was to let him come to the dungeon to humiliate Jin Cheng Ao. He wanted to do this kind of thing. In the martial arts competition last year, Jin Cheng Ao not only defeated him, but also humiliated him in front of everyone and broke one of his legs. If his father didn't spend a lot of money to buy the magical plaster from Yunjing, he would have been a useless person now. How could such hatred disappear just like that? Ah 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 ah. Jin Cheng Ao struggled crazily. A layer of stone powder fell from the wall, but he still couldn't break free. Yan Zai. I will kill you. I will kill all of you. Yan Shixuan, Su Li, wait and see. Yan Zai was horrified. Was Jin Cheng Ao crazy? Why did he look abnormal? However, when he saw Jin Cheng Ao being so embarrassed, he felt more comfortable. He even felt that there was a sign of progress in his cultivation. Jin Cheng Ao, why are you still struggling? You intend to kill the workshop owner of the embroidery workshop in the provincial city. It's a big crime. Even your father can't save you. As long as my father reports to Yunjing, you will be executed immediately. There is no other end. Yan Zai's cruel words were like the tip of a knife stabbing into Jin Cheng Ao's heart. It made Jin Cheng Ao tremble all over. Then, a breath like a storm drowned Yan Zai. What is this? Jin Cheng Ao. Yan Zai was terrified. In his eyes, the wall suddenly cracked like a spider web, and then, boom. The whole dungeon seemed to have an earthquake. Large pieces of the wall that locked the chain fell. Yan Zai was hit carelessly and fainted directly. The dungeon was in chaos in an instant. Jin Cheng Ao saw the consequences caused by his bursting power. His eyes suddenly became clear. The effect of Su Li's medicine had passed. I broke through. The peak of the acquired realm. Jin Cheng Ao was ecstatic. Immediately, he saw Yan Zai, who was pressed under the stone and kept vomiting blood. His pupils shrank immediately. In addition to Yan Zai's life, he would definitely be executed by Yan Shixuan immediately. No. I want to escape. When I reach the inborn realm and come back, even Yan Shixuan can't control me. Thinking of this, Jin Cheng Ao jumped out of the stone wall. He wore a prisoner's uniform and quickly blended into the night. He fled to the wilderness. Feeling the harsh wind in his ears, Jin Cheng Ao was full of excitement. This is the peak of the acquired realm. When my Ao sword skills are further improved, I can tie with the general warriors of the inborn realm without breaking through the inborn realm. Qinghe Province, Yan Shixuan. It won't take long for me to get back at you. Suddenly, a ray of light seemed to shoot from the sky. Before Jin Cheng Ao could react, it penetrated his chest and blasted a fist-sized hole in his chest. Jin Cheng Ao staggered and fell into the dust. He lost his heart and instantly died. His eyes were wide open. There was a little disbelief in his eyes. It seemed that he didn't expect that he would die in such an unknown way. Under the moonlight, Su Li with a pale face walked over with a long bow in her hand. She muttered to the corpse. In the previous life, you did carry forward the Ao sword skills and became a senior at the peak of the inborn realm. You forced the daughter of the Yan family to marry. Yan Hongxiu was tortured to death by you. However, you were too arrogant. You offended too many people in the martial arts circle. Soon, you got into trouble. You died, at the age of 30. However, your Ao sword skills soon had a successor. This successor was not someone else. He was the beggar who found the secret when he collected your corpse. Therefore, your name was left in the biography of the martial arts circle. Although you only lived for 30 years, you became a shining legend in the martial arts circle. In this life, Su Li said and gently put the bow next to the corpse. She split the sole of Jin Cheng Ao's shoe with a sword. I will accept your Ao sword skills. A thin piece of paper fell from the inside of the sole to the ground. Chapter 103. When Su Li returned to the Linli building, the news that Jin Cheng Ao fled for fear of punishment had spread all over the city. It not only made the Yan family angry, but also caught the Jin family off guard. They never expected that Jin Cheng Ao would despise the laws of the Dahan country and escape from the prison. Moreover, he seriously injured the third child of the Yan family. It was said that the third child was dying. Such a change made Jin Jintian realize that the Jin family and the Yen family had completely gone to the opposite side, and there was no room for turning back. Cheng Ao's martial arts talent is very strong. It doesn't matter if he escapes. Jin Jintian looked up at the sky and sighed. He was not sure to deal with the attack of the Yen family. Although he was shocked and surprised that Jin Cheng Ao could escape from the prison, he was more happy and gratified. He knew that his son hid a secret from him, and it must be related to the martial arts circle. Jin Cheng Ao could break the prison of the satrap's mansion with bare hands, which meant that he had reached the peak of the acquired realm. As long as he could go further, no matter which country he goes to, the inborn senior will be respected. At that time, my son's mistake will be reduced to a small one. No one can do anything about it. The more Jin Jintian thought, the more excited he was. But he didn't know that Jin Cheng Ao had become a pool of blood because of Su Li. At the same time, the satrap's mansion was filled with a faint anxiety. Yan Shushuan stood outside the door with a gloomy face. He watched the maids bring out basins of blood from the room, but he didn't see the doctor come out. Madame Yen and Yan Hongxiu stood aside with red eyes. This bastard. Why did he provoke Jin Cheng Ao? His life is in danger. Yan Shushuan couldn't help but scold. Mrs. Yen wiped her tears and said sadly, Lord, at this time, why do you blame the third brother? God bless my son. He must be fine. Jin Cheng Ao. Yan Hongxiu's eyes were burning with hatred. She said, if I knew that he would hurt the third brother, I should have killed him directly. After 2 consecutive shocks, Yan Hongxiu's resentment towards Jin Cheng Ao had reached the extreme. If Jin Cheng Ao hadn't disappeared, she would have rushed into the dungeon with a knife without saying a word. When the 3 of them were waiting anxiously, the sweating doctor finally came out of the room. Yan Shushuan and the other 2 immediately greeted him. Dr. Lin, how's my son? Dr. Lin looked at the 3 people's eager eyes, but he couldn't help sighing, your young master is not as lucky as workshop owner Su. His ribs were broken by the big stone, and one of them happened to pierce into his lungs. I'm afraid, what? Yan Shushuan and the other 2 felt as if they had been struck by lightning, and their faces instantly turned pale. Zai, Lady Yen let out a sorrowful cry. Her eyes rolled back and she fainted. The maidservants were in a flurry. Dr. Lin quickly went forward and pinched her philtrum. Not long after, Lady Yen regained consciousness, but her face was full of tears and she could no longer speak. Lord Yen, there's nothing I can do. It's better to prepare for the young master as soon as possible. Dr. Lin sighed, as if he was too ashamed to stay here any longer. He picked up the medicine box and left in a hurry. Walking into the room, Yan Shushuan stood in front of the window and looked at Yan Zai, who was lying on the bed like a piece of golden paper. Yan Shushuan pursed his lips and felt his hands and feet go cold. In his life, he had experienced all kinds of despair, but none had been as heart-wrenching and bone-chilling as this one. It happened so suddenly that it was too late for Qing Ni and others to come back to see Zai for the last time. Is there really no other way? Yan Shushuan clenched his fists and made a cracking sound. Tap, 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 Yan Hongxiu walked in step by step. She leaned against the bed and stared at Yan Zai blankly. Tears flowed out of her red and swollen eyes. She carefully held Yan Zai's cold hands and whispered with trembling lips, Third brother, don't you like Hongxiu the most? Open your eyes quickly and look at me. Thanks to you, my archery has improved a lot recently, suddenly. Yan Hongxiu seemed to think of something. She was slightly startled and immediately let go of Zai's hands. She turned around and grabbed Yan Shushuan's sleeves, Father. I have a way. Go and find the immortal master. She must have a way to save the third brother. Father, go with me to find the immortal master. Yan Shushuan was shocked by Yan Hongxiu's sudden madness. After hearing his daughter's words, he looked more confused. Immortal master. Who was that? Was it possible that Hongxiu became his disciple? That was too reckless. Why didn't she mention it to him? Father, don't hesitate anymore. Seeing that her father didn't move, Yan Hongxiu suddenly broke down and said, the immortal master also knows the third brother. She is such a powerful person. She will definitely help him. Yan Shixuan was awakened by Yan Hongxiu. He immediately held her hands and said, okay. There's no time to lose. Lead the way to that otherworldly expert immediately. He could already imagine that the so-called master of Yan Hongxiu must be an immortal senior. Such a person might really have a way. No. She is in the Linli building. She is the boss of the Linli building. Yan Hongxiu was so anxious that she burst into tears and said, the immortal master said that I can't tell others about the relationship. I have violated the agreement and can't take more people there. Father, let me go with you to find her. The boss of the Linli building? Yan Shixuan was even more surprised. If he remembered correctly, the boss of the Linli building was a young woman. Although she never showed up, he knew that the woman was definitely younger than him from her figure. Could she help to cure Zai's injury? Yan Shixuan was deeply doubtful, but there was no other way. He didn't hesitate too much and immediately took Yan Hongxiu to go to the Linli building for help. But before they went out of the yard, a servant came to report, Master, the boss of the Linli building came to visit. She said that she had something important to discuss with you. She actually came by herself? Yan Shixuan's hurried expression was slightly stagnant. He immediately said, invite her in. The immortal master is coming. Yan Hongxiu turned from sadness to joy. Since she saw Su Li's magical means, she had a blind confidence in Su Li. After a short while, Su Li dressed as Ms. Li came to the yard. When she saw Yan Shixuan, she bowed slightly and said quickly, Satrap Yan, I take the liberty to visit you. Please forgive me. I heard that the third master of the Linli building was seriously injured and the doctors were helpless. I have a relationship with the third master of the Linli building. Can I have a try? Su Li directly told the purpose of her visit. Yan Shixuan was immediately happy and said quickly, come on. Ms. Li, please come in. My son is in danger. I won't be polite. If my son can survive, I will repay you. Su Li was a little surprised. She looked at Yan Hongxiu who was avoiding her eyes. She immediately understood that the relationship between her and the brother and sister of the Yan family had been exposed. She didn't say anything and stepped into the room. Yan Shixuan immediately followed her. Seeing Yan Zai lying on the bed, Su Li sighed in her heart. She just let Yan Zai stimulate the last power of the medicine in Jin Cheng Ao's body and let him break the chain and escape. But she didn't expect that Jin Cheng Ao directly broke through to the peak of the acquired realm. Yan Zai almost died because of her. Although she was reborn and her medical circle and poison circle had reached the sublime realm, she was not a god. Naturally, she couldn't calculate all the possibilities in the world. Fortunately, Yan Zai's injury was not serious in her eyes. This mistake could be corrected. Ms. Li, how is my son? Can he be saved? Seeing that Su Li didn't speak for a long time, Yan Shixuan couldn't help but ask. Su Li came to her sense and nodded slightly. She said softly, Lord Yan, please be at ease. Your son broke 3 ribs and hurt his lungs. It is impossible for ordinary people. Fortunately, your son has practiced a little Xiangong and can hold on. I know a little about medical circle. This injury can be cured. That's good. Yan Shixuan breathed a long sigh of relief. Then he immediately realized something and exclaimed, Xiangong? Zai has practiced Xiangong. I didn't. If it is convenient for Lord Yan, please leave. I am going to perform acupuncture. I can't be disturbed by others. Su Li interrupted Yan Shixuan faintly. Yan Shixuan woke up and apologized. He left the room without saying anything. He was afraid that his son would be disturbed by Su Li. Back to the door, Yan Shishuan still frowned. No matter how he thought, he couldn't understand how his son secretly learned his Xiangong. He didn't leave any book record and didn't pass it on to anyone. That Xiangong was a secret that couldn't be mentioned to anyone. Miss Li also knows Xiangong. Could it be? Various speculations appeared in Yan Shishuan's mind. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of Yan Hongxiu, who was leaning on the window and peeping. He immediately covered Yan Hongxiu's mouth and carried her down from the window. After walking far away, he asked, "Xiu, do you know anything about the background of your master?" Yan Hongxiu was relieved when her father put her down. She rolled her eyes and said, "Dad, you really scared me. I don't know the background of the immortal master. Besides, she only promised to teach me archery. She didn't let me worship her as a master." "It's good that you didn't worship her as a master." Yan Shishuan breathed a sigh of relief. There were many rules in the martial arts circle. A teacher for a day was a father for a lifetime. If Hongxiu really worshipped her as a master, the relationship between the Yan family and Miss Li would be too close. "However, I heard from the third brother that the immortal master is a great senior." Yan Hongxiu proudly counted her fingers and said, "I remember that she is called inborn senior. Although I don't know what it means, the immortal master is really powerful. She can shoot through the target at once." "Well, she's really powerful." Yan Shishuan was still absent-minded. He gradually recalled the whole sentence of Yan Hongxiu. His heart couldn't stop beating. He couldn't help but grab Yan Hongxiu's shoulder. He stared at her and confirmed again, "Xiu, what did you say? Inborn senior? Are you sure you didn't hear it wrong?" "Dad, you hurt me." Yan Hongxiu struggled for a while and said angrily, "I am not deaf. The third brother repeated it to me many times. How could I hear it wrong?" Yan Shishuan was stunned. He thought that he was just a few feet away from Su Li. What they said before might have been heard by her. His face immediately darkened. This bastard has grown up. He not only learned Xiangong secretly but also got acquainted with an inborn senior quietly. He didn't tell me about these things. When he recovers, I will beat him to the point that he can't get down. How dare he? Chapter 104. Squeak, the door was gently pushed open. Su Li poked her head out, but she didn't see Yan Shishuan and Yan Hongxiu. She couldn't help but feel strange. She was concentrating on treating Yan Zai just now. How could she have time to listen to Yan Shishuan's words? "This. Miss?" At this time, Mrs. Yan hurried in. She couldn't help but be stunned when she saw Su Li. Then she quickly quickened her pace and walked to Su Li. She asked eagerly, "How is Zai? Can I go in and have a look?" She was told by the maids that a young doctor volunteered to treat Yan Zai. She immediately ignored the advice of the maids. She directly got up from the bed and ran to Yan Zai despite her dizziness. Her heart sank when she saw Su Li. Although Su Li wore a veil, she could see at a glance that Su Li was not old. How could such a young girl have such high medical skills? Su Li looked at Mrs. Yan with a gentle smile on her face. She said, "Your child is fine. It is estimated that he will wake up in a few hours. Please go in and sit down and wait." "Okay." Mrs. Yan didn't believe Su Li's words at all. She answered perfunctorily and walked in with red eyes. Su Li was not angry. She tidied up her clothes and left the Yan mansion with the medicine box without disturbing anyone. Mrs. Yan walked into the room and was surprised to see Yan Zai on the bed. She clearly remembered that Zai's face was as white as a piece of paper before, but now it was very ruddy. It seemed that Zai was not in a coma but sleeping. Could it be that the lady just now really has some ability? Mrs. Yan's eyes were faintly shaken. At this time, Yan Zai snorted. Mrs. Yan immediately looked up and saw that Yan Zai's eyelashes trembled and he opened his eyes. "Yi, you wake up." Mrs. Yan was overjoyed. She immediately ran out to inform Yan Shishuan, "Master, Zai woke up." "He woke up. Yan Zai looked at the top of the bed. His eyes were blank. Where am I? Yes, I stimulated Jin Cheng AO in the dungeon. Unexpectedly, his Xiangong broke through and collapsed the dungeon. I am still alive. Yan Zai raised his hand and found that it was not as weak as he imagined. But his chest was still aching. My injuries? Yan Zai touched his chest with a look of surprise. The moment he was hit, he knew that he was done for. He would either die or be seriously injured and become a cripple. But the pain in his body told him that his injury was not serious. He would probably be full of vigor after recuperating for half a month. Zai. Yan Shixuan's voice came from the door. The back door was opened. Yan Hongxiu and Mrs. Yan also arrived. Father. Yan Zai looked ashamed and said, I was wrong. I didn't expect that Jin Cheng AO almost broke through the peak of the acquired realm. I just scolded him a little. You. Yan Shixuan was so angry that he didn't know what to say. This brat had just crawled back from the gates of hell. Could it be that he could give him a heavier punishment? Forget it, forget it. I'll let this matter go. If Mr. Li didn't come in time, you would have been dead already. Yan Shixuan snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves and left. Lady Yan, on the other hand, was beaming with joy. The old master really had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. He was already so anxious earlier, but now he was still pretending to be calm. Did Mr. Li come? Yan Zai was stunned and immediately smiled bitterly. He said, no wonder. I knew that my injury was not so light. The immortal master came by himself. Yan Hongxiu said with a smile, it seems that the third brother has a high position in Mr. Li's mind. I just begged you to find the immortal master. I didn't expect that the immortal master had already arrived. Fortunately, the girl was a miraculous doctor and saved your life. You should thank her. Lady Yan said with a serious face, do you know that when Dr. Lin asked us to prepare for your funeral, my heart was almost broken. Don't mess around in the future. Your life is the most important. Facing his mother's warning, Yan Zai felt guilty and scared. He said, Mother, don't worry. I will do what I can in the future. Tell me in detail. How did you know Mr. Li? Yan Shixuan saw that his son was in good spirits and couldn't help asking. It was in the prisoner camp. Yan Zai remembered the scene on that day and immediately said. After Su Li returned to the Linli building, her days returned to peace. After the incident of Jin Cheng AO, the contradiction between the Yan family and the Jin family was public. The Jin family didn't dare to be as arrogant as before. Everything was as usual in the Linli building and the embroidery workshop. No one deliberately made trouble. Su Li didn't need to take care of the courses in the school because of her injury. Therefore, Su Li stayed in the Linli building these days and asked Fang Yuan to find a craftsman to build a set of distillation equipment mentioned by her husband in the previous life. Su Li, what are you building this thing for? It looks weird. Chu Qingning ran over and looked at the huge thing in the underground addendum. Two barrel-shaped things were connected by long pipes. He didn't know what they were used for. Of course, it is used to make wine. Su Li smiled slightly and answered simply without explaining. This? Chu Qingning was confused and asked, it can make wine. You will know when the new wine comes out. I will teach you how to use it. Su Li checked the equipment and confirmed that it was well sealed. Then she turned around and began to prepare the rice wine. Sister Li, isn't this ordinary rice wine? I think it can be sold in the market. Fang Ling helped Su Li and complained, if this kind of wine is sold in our store, it will lower the level of our store. Ling, don't talk nonsense. Su Li must have a special way. Yin Xiudong glanced at Su Li who was busy and didn't speak and reminded her in a low voice. Fang Ling stuck out her tongue and didn't speak immediately. After the rice was fermented, Su Li wiped her face and said with a smile, you will know when the rice wine is brewed. Ling, you should follow my steps these days and brew more and store it in the warehouse. Remember to mark the date. Okay. Fong Ling nodded hurriedly. She always carried out Su Li's orders unconditionally. Xuetong, you might as well announce the news of the new wine. I think these wines will be on the market in a few days. Yin Xuetong heard Su Li's words and nodded slightly. Then he couldn't help but ask, what is our new wine? I'm afraid that it will not have a big impact if we just say it vaguely. Su Li tilted her head and thought for a while. Then she said, just add one word. After that, she wrote a word on the ground with a little water. Then she turned around and left without saying anything. Yin Xuetong looked at the word on the ground and looked more confused. Strong? What kind of wine is it? It seems that there is no strong wine in Dahan country. After dealing with the chores, Su Li returned to the top floor and opened the window to look at the direction of the satrap's mansion. She was waiting for someone. With her movement technique, she could heal Yen Zai's injuries without anyone noticing, and then leave quietly. But she chose to go above board. In this way, the news that Ms. Li was a medical master would be spread to Wen Ruomin soon. Gong Xiangjuan hadn't heard from her for half a month. She didn't believe that Wen Ruomin wouldn't come to her after the news that Yen Zai was seriously injured was spread. This time, I just want to return Feng Qingru's favor. If not, I don't need to be so troublesome. Su Li sighed in her heart and showed a complex expression. But the favor was the most difficult to return. She wanted Feng Qingru to be the workshop owner of the embroidery workshop according to the track of her previous life and let her live without regret. If he could do that, then he would be able to repay her favor. Su Li thought in her heart. But in the next 7 days, she waited for a long time and didn't see anyone visit the Linli building, which made her feel uneasy. Did something happen to Gong Xiangjuan? Or Gong Xiangjuan was dead? Su Li's eyes were slightly gloomy and she turned to go downstairs. Less than an hour later, she had restored her original identity and appeared in the courtyard of the school. Go to see Dean Gong. I haven't heard from her for a long time. I'm worried. When Su Li walked out of the door, Xiaowu and Datian, who had been worried for many days, were happy. They immediately hesitated and said, Lord, your injury, it doesn't matter. Su Li smiled and shook her head. She said, I have been recuperating for many days. Although I can't take the carriage for a long time, it is not a problem for me to travel such a short distance. Since you said so, Lord. Xiaowu gritted his teeth and led a carefully modified carriage. The carriage was covered with layers of flannels, which greatly reduced the vibration. This is a little gift from Datian and me, hee. Xiaowu scratched his head and blushed. He smiled embarrassedly. Su Li was stunned and immediately showed a gentle smile. She said, thank you. Let's go. Okay. Xiaowu and Datian immediately jumped on the carriage and gently whipped the horse's buttocks. The carriage immediately drove into the forest. Noticing that Xiaowu deliberately slowed down the speed, Su Li was more silent. A strange feeling rose from the bottom of her heart. In the previous life, she was used to deception. No matter who she faced, she was always very vigilant. She was afraid that she had no luck to enjoy the simple enthusiasm of Xiaowu and Datian. Xiaowu, which village did you say you came from? When Xiaowu heard Su Li's question, he immediately laughed and said, Lord, Datian and I are both from a small fishing village by the river outside the Qinghe town. It is very remote and the villagers are not rich. Both of us are orphans who grew up there. We can't read a few words. Sorry to make you laugh at us. When Su Li heard that, she slightly pursed her mouth and immediately said, I'm quite curious after hearing what you said. If you are free, why don't you take me to your village to have a look? Xiaowu was overjoyed when he heard that. That's great. If we can go back with you, we can return to our hometown in glory. Speaking of which, we haven't seen the village head for many years. Speaking of this, Xiaowu suddenly felt that it was inappropriate. He hesitated and said, Lord, I'm afraid not. I'm afraid that it's not safe for you to go there with your appearance. Don't worry. I'll take guards with me. Su Li dispelled Xiaowu's doubts. Dadian grinned from ear to ear. It was great to take the opportunity to go back and have a look. With the protection of guards, they didn't have to worry about being robbed by thieves. Su Li sat in the carriage and her eyes were gloomy. The idea of going to Xiaowu's hometown to have a look just emerged in her mind. If these two people were willing, it would be better to give them a good fortune. However, everything had not been decided yet. She had to go to the small fishing village to make a decision. Lord, we have arrived at the courtyard of Din Gong. Xiaowu's voice came. Su Li walked out of the carriage and approached the courtyard. She immediately frowned. In addition to the Numas of Gong Min, Gong Xiangjuan, Wen Ruomin and Feng Qingru, there were others. When the maids at the door saw Su Li coming, they immediately saluted. They knew the relationship between Su Li and Gong Xiangjuan, so they immediately took Su Li into the courtyard without informing her. After Su Li followed them across a courtyard gate, the vague voice in the courtyard suddenly became clear. Chapter 105. Inside the room, it was still the same as last time. However, Gong Xiangjuan was not in front of the desk, but lying on the bed. Feng Qingru and Gong Min sat on one side respectively. Wen Ruomin sat on the armchair beside the bed. The three of them glared at the plump woman standing in the room. Second mother, it was you who made Grandma go away. Now you want her to go back with illness. Gong Min was not as gentle as before. Her eyes were full of resentment and hatred. She said, I want to ask you. What is your intention? The plump woman was Wu Yun, the second madam of the Gong family. Wen Ruomin sat aside and breathed quickly. She was not a member of the Gong family, so it was not appropriate for her to intervene in this matter. But if Wu Yun really wanted to take away Gong Min and Gong Xiangjuan forcibly, she would never sit idly by. Wu Yun seemed to be touched by Gong Min. She looked slightly annoyed, but she returned to normal in an instant. She even said with a little apology, Min. You also know that I was young and aggressive at that time. It was all the consequences of impulsiveness. Now I know that I was wrong. Can't you forgive me? Gong Min's eyes were very cold, as if she did not see the apology on Wu Yun's face. She said, some things are wrong. If you admit your mistake now, can you save my mother's life? Wu Yun's tail seemed to be stepped on by a cat. She was angry and screamed, Gong Min. I didn't kill your mother. How many times do you want me to say that before you believe it? I will never believe it. Gong Min leaned over the bed and said resolutely and crisply, go away. As long as you are still in that home, Grandma and I will never go back. Wu Yun stopped breathing. The hypocritical expression on her face was like a piece of paper being torn. Her expression was slightly distorted. When Ruomin saw that the situation was not good, she immediately stood up and shouted coldly, Wu Yun. This is not the Wu mansion or the Gong mansion. What do you want to do? Believe it or not, I will call someone to drive you out. Wu Yun stopped and her chest trembled with anger. She said, good. 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 Very good, Gong Min, you are very good. Let's forget about today. Since I have come to Qinghe town, don't think that I will give up so easily. Let's wait and see. Wu Yun glared at Gong Xiangjuan on the bed and immediately left. She glanced at Su Li in front of the door and snorted coldly. She warned, if anyone comes to see the old lady of the Gong family after today, don't blame me for being merciless. Su Li smiled gently and walked in without looking at Wu Yun. Wu Yunfeng's eyes widened in anger, and her face turned pale. She didn't mind the Gong family. But how could a little student of the Qinghe girls' school despise her? How preposterous. All of you, just you wait. Wu Yun roared madly and left the courtyard with her people. The remaining three people all smiled and felt that this scene was really refreshing. Su Li, why are you here? How are your injuries? Gong Min forced a smile as she wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Su Li shook her head and smiled warmly, it's no big deal. I heard that Dean Gong also fell ill. I feel better these days, so I come to see her. By the way, just now. When Ruomin sighed and shook her head, little girl Su, you shouldn't get involved in this. That woman is not easy to deal with, but she married into the Gong family in Yunjing. Now the backyard of the Gong family belongs to her. Even Dean Gong was driven out by her. The Gong family in Yunjing? Su Li said in surprise. She was really surprised. In the previous life, she had no contact with Gong Xiangjuan. How could she know her specific origin? Yes, the Gong family is a big family in Yunjing. When Ruomin explained in detail, the big families in Yunjing are inextricably linked with the imperial court. You can't offend them. You have offended Wu Yun just now. She will definitely hold a grudge and make trouble for you in the future. Even the Qinghe girls' school can't help you. When Ruomin said helplessly. Gong Min and Feng Qingru were even more depressed. Seeing this, Su Li immediately comforted her, Dean Wen, you don't have to think so far. I turned misfortune into blessing this time. My luck is not bad. Don't worry about me. The most urgent thing is the illness of Dean Gong. I heard from the mammy that the third son of the satrap was almost killed by Jin Cheng A.O., but he was saved later. Why don't we try our luck? That's what I want to do. When Ruomin's eyes brightened when she heard Su Li's words. She said, although the satrap doesn't seem to want to say more for fear of offending that person. I learned from the servants in their mansion that the mysterious boss of the Linli building cured the third son of the Yen family. I intend to send someone to invite him, but I have been harassed by Wu Yun all day these days. I can't get away. I see. Su Li suddenly understood and then suggested, if you don't mind, Dean Wen, why don't you write a letter? I happen to go back to the courtyard on the way. Let Xiaowu take the letter to avoid being noticed by Wu Yun. That's great. When Ruomin immediately got up and walked to the desk. She wrote a letter quickly and gave it to Su Li. She said, thank you. You should be careful. Okay. Without much delay, Su Li went back to the Linli building on the grounds that she was not feeling well. She handed the letter to Xiaowu. Xiaowu naturally went to the Linli building without stopping. Su Li arranged a contingency in the Linli building. Xiaowu quickly got the reply and rushed back to Gong Xiangjuan's courtyard. When Ruomin saw that Xiaowu was so efficient and praised him in her heart, she immediately opened the reply letter. Thank you for your kindness. I will visit you tonight and treat the Dean Gong. When Ruomin was overjoyed after reading the short sentence, she said, he agreed. Mr. Li is really merciful. He agreed immediately. Gong Min stayed at the bedside and couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. It was rumored that Mr. Li was mysterious and had superb medical skills. Even if he couldn't completely cure her grandma, he could tell what disease her grandma had. Su Li returned to the Linli building from the courtyard and took the medicine box hidden in the underground addendum. Then she dressed up as Mr. Li and came to the gate of the school. It was getting dark. There were already people waiting at the gate of the school. Seeing Su Li's iconic white dress, two people immediately greeted her and said respectfully, "Are you Mr. Li?" Su Li nodded slightly. The two people were overjoyed and immediately let Su Li get on the carriage. Then they drove all the way to Gong Xiangjuan's courtyard. There was no accident on the way. Su Li returned to Gong Xiangjuan's courtyard. Her pneuma and expression had changed, so people who were familiar with her couldn't see any clue. "Mr. Li, you finally come." When Ruomin stood in front of the door and saw that Mr. Li was a young woman, she was slightly surprised, but she quickly reacted and came out to greet Mr. Li calmly. Su Li smiled gently and said in a strange tone, "Dean Wen, you don't have to be so polite. It's not too late. I will go in and treat Dean Gong." Seeing that Su Li was so straightforward, when Ruomin was also relieved. She had no time to doubt Su Li's medical skills. Then she stepped aside to let Su Li go in. "Hello, Mr. Li." When Gong Min saw Su Li in white with a veil on her face come in, she was stunned. But she reacted quickly and immediately gave way to Su Li so that Su Li could feel Gong Xiangjuan's pulse. At this time, it was meaningless to doubt Su Li. It was better to let Su Li diagnose and see the result. Su Li felt Gong Xiangjuan's pulse and immediately frowned. Her inference was right. In the previous life, Gong Xiangjuan was poisoned to death. But in this life, she was affected by Su Li and showed symptoms in advance. Su Li thought and slowly let go of her hand to feel the pulse. Gong Min, who was worried, waited for a moment and finally couldn't help asking, "Mr. Li, what disease does my grandma have?" "Do you have?" "Miss Gong, calm down. Let me ask you a few questions." Su Li raised her hand to stop Gong Min from asking more questions. She asked, "Who is responsible for Dean Gong's daily food and drink?" Gong Min's face turned pale and she said, "Mr. Li, you mean, yes." Su Li nodded slightly and said, "Dean Gong is not sick, but poisoned." As soon as Su Li said that, the three people present all turned pale with horror. Even Gong Xiangjuan's eyes moved violently. Dean Gong didn't offend anyone. How could she be poisoned? When Ruomin suddenly thought of something and her face immediately became gloomy. It seems that Dean Wen has gained something. Su Li sighed softly and said, "A few days ago, the lecturer of your school, Su Li, was arrested, which coincided with the time when Dean Gong fell ill. Don't you have any ideas?" The Jin family. When Ruomin looked pale. She didn't expect that the Jin family was so crazy that they even dared to kill Gong Xiangjuan for an embroidery workshop. Weren't they afraid that the Gong family would get even with them? Su Li said at this time, in fact, the Jin family had a sense of propriety. But they didn't expect that there was hidden poison in Dean Gong's body for many years. The toxicity of the new poison was not strong, but it triggered the outbreak of the hidden poison. That made Dean Gong fall into the current strange symptoms. Every sentence of Su Li's analysis was like reeling silk from cocoons, which made everyone understand. "You mean?" When Ruomin's tone became more and more difficult, there was poison in Dean Gong's body? Gong Min's face was pale and she breathed quickly. She seemed to think of something and the flickering light in her eyes became darker. Su Li glanced at Gong Min and immediately nodded and said, "Yes. This kind of hidden poison needs the poisoner to be very patient. The poisoner has been poisoned for many years to have an effect. Once it accumulates to a certain extent, it will immediately break out and kill people. It looks like a sudden death. The reason can't be found at all." When Ruomin's hands and feet were cold when she heard it. She looked at Gong Xiangjuan who couldn't move on the bed and felt scared. In this way, the poison of the Jin family saved her elder sister's life. If the poison hadn't been drawn out in advance and Mr. Li came to see it, the elder sister would have died suddenly. Hearing the word, "died suddenly," Gong Min tightly grasped the bed sheet. Her face was as pale as snow and even her lips were pale. Feng Qingru noticed something strange and immediately held Gong Min for fear that she would fall down. Seeing such a reaction, it was not difficult for Su Li to guess that Gong Min's mother might have died suddenly. It was likely that the person who poisoned Gong Xiangjuan was the same person. If both Gong Min's mother and Gong Xiangjuan died, who could get benefits? She didn't need to think to know that it was Wu Yun during the day. It turns out that people surnamed Wu are all bad. Thinking of this, Su Li showed a cold smile at the corner of her mouth. "Mr. Li, can Grandma be saved?" Gong Min's face was pale and she reluctantly asked. She looked at Su Li eagerly with fear in her eyes. She was afraid that Su Li would shake her head. "Of course, she can be saved." Su Li gently stroked Gong Min's head and transferred a trace of vital energy to her, which made Gong Min's face slightly ruddy. "If the hidden poison accumulates enough and breaks out, it may be too late for me to save her. But the current situation is not difficult for me." If Miss Gong trusts me, it is better to send Dean Gong to the Linley building. Detoxification is not a day's work. The poison will even change at any time in the process of detoxification. It is obviously more convenient to send her to me. Gong Min's eyes immediately lit up when she heard this. She said, Mr. Li, please let me go with Grandma. I will pay the full medical expenses. I can also work for the winery. Su Li smiled slightly and was about to agree. Suddenly, she looked cold. Gong Min was at a loss. Suddenly, she saw several cold arrows shot from the beam in the night sky. The targets were Su Li and Gong Xiangjuan, who was lying on the bed. Be careful. Behind. Seeing this scene, Feng Qingru and Gong Min looked shocked and shouted to remind. When Ruomin and Su Li also turned their backs, but they were still at a loss and didn't know what happened. At the moment when Feng Qingru and Gong Min closed their eyes in fear. Ding! 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 Chapter 106. The long sword drew a beautiful arc and flashed several times in Gong Min's eyes with great precision. The tip of the sword seemed to have eyes and actually touched the tips of all the darts. A series of crisp sounds mixed together, and then the darts fell to the ground weakly with tinkling sounds. Damn it! When the man in black saw this scene, he suddenly showed a look as if he had seen a ghost. He was so scared that he ran away without saying anything. But before he took a few steps, a white light flashed in front of him, and Su Li's figure appeared in front of him like a ghost. Su Li snorted coldly. Before the man in black could react, she chopped his neck with one hand. The man suddenly groaned and fell to the ground. A bloody smell suddenly spread. Su Li couldn't help frowning and squatting down to check. The black cloth on the face of the man in black was overflowing with blood. Missed? Su Li was slightly shocked. She uncovered the black cloth and saw a strange and pale face. She pried open the man's teeth and looked carefully. But she didn't see the poison bag. Gong Min and Feng Qingru supported each other to come out. When they saw the dead body on the ground, they immediately felt weak and sat down. Dead, dead? Ms. Li, he. Gong Min was frightened. Even when she was in the Gong family in Yunjing, she had never seen a dead person. When she lived in the Qinghe town with her grandma, she had no chance to see such ugly things. Su Li nodded slightly and said in a low voice, I was careless. This person was poisoned. I knocked him out, but hit the fatal point of the poison. He died suddenly. There must be a master of poison behind this person. Poison, it was poison again. Gong Min regained her composure. Her childish face was full of hatred. She had already guessed who was behind the killer. At this time, when Ruomin came out with a crutch. She had seen many ups and downs in her life. Her face was just a little pale. She bowed to Su Li and said, this matter frightened Ms. Li. Thanks to Ms. Li's superb martial arts, you would have been killed by the thief today. Su Li threw the bloody scarf on the face of the man in black. She stood up and clapped her hands. She said, it doesn't matter. It's a piece of cake. It's just that after this incident, the academy is no longer safe. Why don't you send Dean Gong to my place tonight? When Ruomin was scared and also shocked by Su Li's strength. There was a martial arts school in the Qinghe school. When Ruomin usually knew about it. But the strength of those martial arts lecturers was totally different from that of Ms. Li. Just thinking about that kind of speed and reflexes made her shudder. It was not something an ordinary martial artist could achieve. It seems that if I want to know more about Mr. Li, I have to go to the satrap's mansion. Thinking of this, when Ruomin slightly bowed and said, thank you so much for your timely help. Min, hurry up and pack up. We will leave immediately. Gong Min nodded repeatedly, and Feng Qingru followed her to help. She hadn't spoken much since Gong Xiangjuan came to diagnose. Although Gong Xiangjuan was her mentor, she still knew too little about Gong Xiangjuan's family background. Su Li nodded slightly, and there was a hint of contemplation in her eyes. In this way, Gong Xiangjuan's life was saved by her, and she didn't need to worry about Gong Min's safety. Wu Yun couldn't do anything. She would definitely vent her anger on Feng Qingru and her identity. The Feng family, where Feng Qingru came from, was also a famous family in the Qinghe town. As the saying went, a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a snake in its old haunts. Wu Yun couldn't move the forces under her control in Yunjing, so she couldn't do anything to Feng Qingru. In this case, Wu Yun would certainly choose to vent her anger on the weakest persimmon. Thinking of this, Su Li couldn't help but feel a little helpless. She just got rid of the future trouble, Jin Cheng Ao. Before she could take a breath, troubles came one after another. It really made her restless. In the previous life, Jin Cheng Ao tortured and killed him in the street under the watchful eyes of the public. In this life, there is no Jin Cheng Ao, so it will not happen. But, Su Li looked into the distance and looked at Yunjing. There was a hint of worry in her eyes. Under her intervention, the destiny of many people in this life had been completely different. Yan Zai's serious injury was an accident. Presumably, there would be more things that were out of her control in the future. Could she really help him achieve the goal of the previous life? The worry in Su Li's eyes was inadvertently caught by Gong Min. Gong Min suddenly felt puzzled. Would a powerful and extraordinary woman like Ms. Li also have troubles? Was there anything in this world that could stump her? Gong Min was puzzled, but she didn't dare to ask. When the moon was in the middle of the sky, the carriage of the Qinghe school arrived at the Linli building. Maybe Wu Yun was too confident in the killers and didn't notice the change of mind. Or maybe Wu Yun was afraid of Su Li's strength. It was very peaceful along the way, and no killers appeared. Fang Yuan and others had already prepared for it. They had made a quiet room on the third floor for the grandmother and granddaughter of the Gong family to live. It was not far from Su Li from the attic on the top floor. It was very convenient. The Linli building was a winery, not an inn. The guest rooms were also on the back of the first floor. Seeing the room specially made by the people of the Linli building, Gong Min felt warm in her heart. She even had an impulse to cry. Her gratitude to Su Li couldn't be described in words. Even from the relatives of the Gong family, she hadn't experienced the feeling of being cared for a long time. Poor child, but she is also lucky. She can meet such a good doctor as Ms. Li. When Ruomin sighed and left with the servants, she had to go back to the school to preside over the affairs. After a while, the Linli building returned to silence. After Gong Min wiped the body of her grandma, it was very late at night. But she didn't feel sleepy at all. She was full of irritation and had nowhere to vent. After sitting quietly beside her grandma for a moment, she gently pushed the door open. Seeing the whole Linli building was dark, her heart seemed to be infected by the boundless darkness and was full of despair. "Brother, if you were still here, would you tell me what to do?" Gong Min whispered to herself and walked slowly along the darkness. Suddenly, she glimpsed a light. The light was not strong, but it seemed to make Gong Min find a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what she was thinking, but she didn't hesitate to get close to it. In the attic on the top floor, Su Li heard the movement and immediately put away the AO sword skills. Then she heard the source of the footsteps. Suddenly, she was relieved and reached out to grab the veil hanging on the wall. She immediately put it on. After finishing this step, Gong Min's small voice sounded outside, "Ms. Li, are you asleep?" Gong Min was perturbed. She didn't know why she was not afraid of Ms. Li. She clearly knew that Ms. Li's martial arts were absolutely more powerful than those killers in the daytime. If she was offended at will, she would definitely suffer. As soon as she finished speaking, the attic suddenly opened silently and automatically. Gong Min was so shocked that she couldn't help but look up. In the dim candlelight, she saw a beautiful figure still covered with a veil and holding a thick and simple booklet in her hand. The color in the room was extremely dark, but Gong Min could see it clearly. The picturesque picture instantly reflected in her heart, as if the scene in front of her was beautiful and needed to be remembered. But the only pity was that Ms. Li's veil was not removed. She still didn't know what Ms. Li really looked like. "Miss Gong Min, why do you visit me so late at night?" Su Li's voice was indifferent, but it made Gong Min feel cold. She said with grievance, "Ms. Li, sorry to disturb you. I can't sleep." Su Li sighed softly. Indeed, it was taboo to disturb others' practice in the martial arts circle. Therefore, no matter Fang Yuan, Chu Qingning or others at night, they would never disturb her. But Gong Min was not from the martial arts circle. Forget it. She didn't need to be angry with a child. In this case, come and sit down. Hearing Su Li's soft voice, Gong Min was relieved. She walked over and sat down opposite Su Li. Looking at Su Li's deep eyes, she couldn't help being intoxicated and reassured. Ms. Li, who had such beautiful eyes, must be a fairy as beautiful as a fairy. Compared with Ms. Li, she was much more ordinary. Gong Min was in a trance. She suddenly thought that if she only told Ms. Li, she didn't have to worry about it. Why did she have to hold it in and support herself bitterly? Thinking of this, Gong Min's eyes gradually became firm. She suddenly said, "Ms. Li, would you like to listen to my story?" Su Li was a little interested in it. She looked up at Gong Min, who was serious, but then she lowered her head as if she didn't care. "If you want to tell me, just say it. I'm listening. But I may not help you with something. You have to think it over." Gong Min was happy and quickly said, "It's great that you are willing to listen. I just feel that it's a little hard for me to be alone. It's a great merit for me that you can cure my grandma." How dare Gong Min ask for too much? Su Li replied lightly and didn't seem to care, but her ears were slightly raised. Gong Min's eyes darkened and gradually fell into memory. "In my childhood memory, the Gong family was extremely warm. There was a dignified but warm father. My mother and brother loved me dearly. But since my father married the second wife, everything changed. In the cold night wind, the girl's low narration was like a sad and beautiful ballad, demonstrating the tragedy of the world. A trace of white gradually rose from the east, indicating the arrival of a new day. In the attic on the top floor, Gong Min left with red eyes, but there was a relieved smile on her face. She finally didn't have to hold everything in her heart. Although Ms. Li didn't seem to listen, she didn't have to support herself. When Gong Min completely disappeared outside the room, Su Li put down the file and fell into meditation. In her opinion, Gong Min's experience was very simple. It was nothing more than a pot of muddy water stirred up by Wu Yun. Not only was her mother secretly poisoned, but even her brother was charged with a groundless crime and exiled. Gong Xiangjuan was so angry that she ran away from home with Gong Min. The whole Gong family became the home of Wu Yun and her biological son. Su Li had experienced this kind of plot too many times in the previous life. Every day in the martial arts circle, some families were destroyed and tragic. She had seen too many relatives killing each other, so she had long been accustomed to it. However, Gong Min's narration also made her gain something and solved the mystery that puzzled her in the previous life. In the previous life, she didn't know the specific reason why her disabled husband failed. Later, she sneaked into Yunjing to investigate carefully. But because the Wu family erased too many clues, she couldn't find out where to start. However, her thorough investigation didn't come up empty-handed. Among them, there was a suspicious point about the Gong family's demise. Different from other families that were destroyed by the general's mansion, the Gong family was destroyed by one person, and it was a master of martial arts circle who used a sword. Among them, a middle-aged woman died extremely miserably. Her face was distorted, and her limbs were broken. She had experienced extremely cruel torture before she died. That kind of torture was not commonly used even in the martial arts circle, so she was very impressed. She had always suspected that her disabled husband had a grudge against that madam, so he killed her personally. Now it seemed that it was very likely that the exiled first child came back to take revenge. The sudden death of his mother, grandmother, and Gong Min were enough to make the first child crazy. He tortured Wu Yun to death and slaughtered the whole Gong family, which became a puppet. Chapter 107. Wu Yun had a good sleep. When she got up in the morning and saw the bright sunshine outside, she was in a good mood. Girl of the Gong family, you forced me to do that. Don't blame me. Wu Yun snorted and began to have breakfast slowly under the arrangement of servants. If she hadn't been humiliated like that yesterday, she would not have done that. But it was good. As long as the old thing Gong Xiangjuan died, the entire Gong family would really fall into her hands and she would never be criticized. Gong Min was still young and couldn't be her opponent. She could make Gong Min obediently be manipulated by her with just a little trick. Thinking of this, Wu Yun was overjoyed and even couldn't help humming. At this moment, a maid rushed in the door in a panic and said, "Madam, it's bad. The old lady is fine and was taken away by the doctor. The person sent by Madam is also." Crack. Wu Yun's expression suddenly changed. She didn't even know that the chopsticks in her hand fell to the ground. The person sent by the master is dead? After receiving the specific report from the spy, Wu Yun was so angry that her face turned red. How could the person sent by the master fail? And the person didn't come back and directly died in the school. Is it possible that there is a powerful senior in the school? Wu Yun suddenly thought of something and her expression changed slightly. Then she couldn't help but shake her head and said, "No. If it is true, how can Wen Ruomin let the doctor take the old thing away? In this case, the powerful person is the mysterious doctor. Mr. Li." Wu Yun's expression immediately became extremely ugly. She was not stupid and very smart. Otherwise, she would not have broken up the Gong family in just a few years and made it her puppet. The master once said that no one could detoxify the poison he gave. How come there is an unfathomable Mr. Li? Not only the person sent by the master is killed, but also the poison can be detoxified. This. Wu Yun's mind was in a mess. She had a smooth life in Yunjing. Why did she fail miserably in a small place like the Qinghe town? No. If the old thing really goes back to the Gong family, I will definitely have a lot of trouble. Since I can't take the opportunity to kill her halfway, I must think of another way. Wu Yun narrowed her eyes and gradually grasped the corner of the table with force. Her sharp and long nails left rows of marks on the table. She believed that everything could not be perfect and there must be flaws. But she just didn't find them or didn't make good use of them. Now, immediately go to the Tianya house to get a file on the current situation of the forces in the Qinghe town. No matter how much it costs, I must get the most detailed one. Wu Yun gently breathed a sigh of relief and ordered. She would study it carefully and make a long-term plan. While treating Gong Xiangjuan, Su Li returned to the school during the day and continued to study the books in the girls' school. It was useless to be an armchair strategist, but she had a lot of experience in her previous life and had been to many places. Combined with the biographies in the books, she had gained a lot. However, her reading speed was still too fast. Although she had only stayed here for a little more than 2 months, she had already read from the first floor to the top floor. There were only a few books left that she did not pay attention to. However, she had roughly memorized the words in those books. When she had nothing to do, she would pick them out and think about them. It could be said that she did not have a single moment to relax. On the 6th floor, Su Li picked up the book and was about to write it down again, but an unexpected guest came. "Ruhan? What are you?" Su Li looked Mei Ruhan up and down, and her eyes were full of surprise. Mei Ruhan wore a very simple cloth dress. If there were not a few hairpins on her head, she would almost regard her as a maid. Mei Ruhan smiled embarrassedly, but she didn't care about the eyes of others. She took Su Li's hand to a secluded place and whispered, "Li, I have been worried about you since I heard that you were seriously injured. It's a pity that I'm too busy to visit you. Now that you're here, your body should have recovered." Su Li nodded slightly. She had realized it now. Are you here for the agreement with me? Mei Ruhan was even more embarrassed. She said bitterly, Li, I know it's not very kind. But I don't have a choice. Does the job you mentioned before still count? Of course. Su Li nodded and smiled. There seemed to be a flash of light in her eyes. Mei Ruhan didn't see it, so she was surprised and said, That's great. Li, when will we go? Su Li pretended to think, and then took the pen and ink. She wrote a line of words on the table and gave it to Mei Ruhan, Take this letter to the Linli building. I believe they will take you in. Mei Ruhan was stunned. The Linli building? Did she hear it wrong? That was one of the most famous taverns in the entire Qinghe town. Just the fact that they had just released a new wine with the word, strong, on the signboard had caused countless people to discuss it. Even she, who didn't drink, had heard about it. Now Su Li introduced her to work there. Mei Ruhan was very surprised. She heard that the salary of the Linli building was much higher than that of ordinary taverns and inns. Although she was curious why Su Li had such a way, she had no time to think about it now. She took Su Li's letter and went to the Linli building. Su Li saw Mei Ruhan leave in a hurry. Her eyes flashed, and then she left immediately. She returned to the Linli building before Mei Ruhan arrived. Su Li originally thought that Mei Ruhan's financial situation would be relieved after she went home, but she didn't expect that it was more serious than before. Now she wanted to know why Mei Ruhan was willing to do this. After all, Mei Ruhan was the person Su Li liked for a long time. Now it was time to cultivate her. Mei Ruhan came to the Linli building with the letter. After hesitating for a few seconds, she finally plucked up the courage and stepped into the threshold regardless of others' gazes. What can I do for you, sir? A waiter came up and asked with a warm smile. Mei Ruhan suddenly panicked. She quickly took out Su Li's letter and stammered, I'm here to work. The waiter was stunned and looked strange. The waiter of the Linli building was bought by the boss. Many people wanted to work in the Linli building, but they were all refused. The news had already spread. Didn't the woman know it? Mei Ruhan saw the waiter's reaction. Her heart thumped and her face turned pale. Was Su Li's letter useless? When the waiter was in a daze, Yin Xuedong came from the back hall. The waiter hurriedly saluted and said, Shopkeeper. Yin Xuedong took the paper from the waiter's hand and waved her hand. She said, It's none of your business here. You can leave now. The waiter hurriedly responded, but he couldn't help sighing in his heart. The two people who were bought the worst now became the senior management of the Linli building. It was really fate that made fools of people. Shopkeeper. When Mei Ruhan saw Yin Xuedong, who was small and lovely, she couldn't help but tense up. She was a big shot who was more powerful than the head of the Mei family. Although they seemed to be the same age, she was very nervous. Yin Xuedong opened Su Li's letter and couldn't help but curl her lips. This was an ordinary letter of introduction. She was really meticulous in doing things. Yin Xuedong looked Mei Ruhan up and down and sighed in her heart. But she pretended to be okay. She said lightly, You come at the right time. I need a helper recently. Can you stay and help me? Ah. Mei Ruhan was surprised. She didn't do anything, but she was hired. Wasn't this child's play? Yin Xuedong was a little annoyed when she saw it. She said, What are you confused about? If I haven't been in urgent need of people recently, do you think you can pass easily? No. Mei Ruhan waved her hand in panic. Then she bowed clumsily and said, Thank you, shopkeeper. I will work hard in the future. Yin Xuedong suddenly had a more headache. Was this the key training target that Su Li said? Why did she feel that Mei Ruhan was just an ordinary and inexperienced little girl? Well, since Su Li said it, let's have a try. Yin Xuedong nodded slightly and took Mei Ruhan into the back hall to change clothes. Then she began to teach her what to do as a shopkeeper. Mei Ruhan was in the state of 100,000 wise all the time, which almost drove Yin Xuedong crazy. Fortunately, Yin Xuedong soon found that Mei Ruhan was really smart. She learned some things quickly and learned quickly. Yin Xuedong gradually admitted that Su Li did find a promising person. If the Linli building opened branches in the future, there was no need to worry about the problem of the shopkeeper. Thinking of this, Yin Xuedong taught Mei Ruhan more attentively. Mei Ruhan was more and more frightened. She couldn't figure out how to learn how to be a shopkeeper when she was just a handyman. Was this what a temporary worker should learn? She didn't think about Su Li. After all, Su Li had a clean background. It was absolutely impossible for her to have a close relationship with such a force. But after thinking about Su Li, Mei Ruhan only felt strange. The Linli building was really strange. This thought lasted until the evening. Mei Ruhan received the first salary in her life. So much. Mei Ruhan looked at the 100 taels of silver in her hand and was confused. She did nothing today. How could she have 100 taels of silver? As long as you sign this contract, 100 taels of silver is your reward. Yin Xuedong smiled and pushed a piece of official paper. She didn't find that she had the talent to cheat people until today. Contract? Mei Ruhan's heart trembled. There was no free lunch in the world. Did this contract ask her to sell herself to the Linli building? It's not as serious as you think. It's just an ordinary contract. Yin Xuedong knew what Mei Ruhan was thinking. She couldn't help but laugh and said, "You might as well take it and have a look. It's up to you whether to sign it or not." Okay. Mei Ruhan swallowed. She picked up the thin paper and put it in front of her eyes. Then she was stunned. This was indeed an ordinary contract. Only a special provision was added. That was, during the period of working in the Linli building, you must not disclose any secret about the Linli building. And you must maintain absolute loyalty to the Linli building. Otherwise, you will be held responsible by the Linli building. Mei Ruhan looked at it again and again, but she didn't think it was a deterrent. Thinking of the current situation, she finally picked up the pen and wrote her name. Then she stamped it with her fingerprint. Yin Xuedong smiled more. She slowly put away the contract and said, "You can go now. Don't forget to come at night. If you don't come for one day, I will deduct it from your salary." Seeing that Yin Xuedong didn't put forward any excessive requirements, Mei Ruhan was finally relieved. She held the 100 taels of silver and went out of the Linli building happily. Then she identified the direction. Instead of going back to the school to rest, she ran out of the city. Chapter 108. Following Mei Ruhan all the way, Su Li stood on the dark roof along the street and watched Mei Ruhan buy a lot of food and herbs from the shops on the street. Su Li raised her eyebrows and became more interested. It seemed that Mei Ruhan had other encounters in the Qinghe town, and she couldn't tell anyone about them. Otherwise, with her personality, she wouldn't have asked for help without saying a word. Mei Ruhan packed everything with difficulty and put away the remaining silver. She seemed to think of something and couldn't help showing a trace of joy on her face. After going out of the city gate, she chose some remote and difficult roads regardless of the danger at night. After walking for an hour, Su Li finally saw a dilapidated temple covered in the forest. There were many beggars in the dilapidated temple. Mei Ruhan walked into the dilapidated temple with ease and distributed most of the food to them. She came to the innermost room and put down the package on her back. She gasped hard and immediately whispered, "Brother Long, are you there? Ruhan is here to see you." Brother Long. After Mei Ruhan calmly called him 3 or 4 times, a man finally crawled out from behind the dilapidated Buddha statue, accompanied by the clanking of chains. The man was unkempt and dirty, and his clothes were ragged. But it could be seen that he was a young man in his early 20s, and he was not small. There was a chain on the shoulder bones of the young man. It seemed that someone had forcibly knocked one end of the chain into the bones, so that he could not exert his strength and suffered severe pain all day long. Su Li saw him through the gap of the roof and raised her eyebrows slightly. The punishment of piercing the bones was a torture that only felons who committed serious crimes would receive. The chain on his shoulder was rusty and did not bleed, which was enough to infer that he had been chained for at least 1 year. He hasn't died after 1 year, and his pneuma is quite vigorous. Another person who practices Xiangong. Su Li was very interested and continued to watch. When the young man saw Mei Ruhan coming, his eyes softened for a moment, but he became cold again before Mei Ruhan noticed it. What are you doing here? Do you forget what I said last time? I told you to get out. Did you hear me? The young man almost shouted with all his strength, and the chains on his body clanked. Mei Ruhan's body trembled, and tears of grievance welled up in her eyes. She, who had been spoiled since she was a child, had never been scolded like this. However, she did not leave. Instead, she wiped away her tears and began to take out something from the bag on her back. This is an analgesic herb. The doctor said that it will have a miraculous effect if you crush it. These are dry rations. You must hide them well. Don't let other beggars snatch it away. I also brought you some clothes, water, and a dry cloth. Don't forget to wipe yourself. The young man stared at Mei Ruhan in a daze, and his face was trembling. Finally, he lay on the ground and said lightly, "It's up to you. Next time, I allow you to bring someone here. Don't walk alone at night." Mei Ruhan paused for a moment and then sped up. She lowered her head. No one could see that her eyes were shining, which had never been seen in the past 17 years. After Mei Ruhan hid the delicious food for the young man, she chatted with him for a while. 90% of the time, Mei Ruhan talked about the interesting things in the Qinghe town alone. The young man just said, from time to time. Mei Ruhan could talk about such a strange conversation for a full hour. Mei Ruhan didn't return to the Qinghe town alone until late at night. She didn't know who gave her the courage to walk at night. The area outside the Qinghe town was not a peaceful area. Fortunately, she had good luck in the past 2 months and didn't encounter any danger. After Mei Ruhan left, there was only the young man in the room. The coldness in the young man's eyes faded away, leaving only tenderness. He stared at the place where Mei Ruhan sat just now and couldn't help touching it. The hay was still a little warm. He had lost all hope. He even couldn't escape the pursuit of the officers and soldiers and died in the forest that day. But he didn't expect to meet her. What's more, she didn't expect that the first reaction when she saw him was not fear, but protection. She clearly had such a weak and delicate body, yet she carried him, a man who weighed more than 100 pounds, from the wilderness outside the city to this broken temple. In order for him to live here, she even gave all the valuable things she had to those beggars. The young man touched the rusty chain weakly. Bitterness surged in his mouth. He couldn't help but murmur to himself, "I am a dying man. Why did you make a wrong choice? If you think so, she really made a wrong choice." Su Li floated down from the roof. The young man's whole body suddenly tightened. He arched his back like a cheetah about to attack. The tenderness in his eyes was gone. Instead, he exuded the tragic atmosphere of a lonely wolf in a desperate situation. He was careless. The young man looked at the girl in black with a black veil suddenly appeared in front of him. He didn't even know when the girl arrived. Su Li looked at the young man with interest and nodded slightly, "You are very good. Although you know that you are not my opponent, you can ignite your fighting spirit. But Mei Ruhan can't. What are you going to do?" The young man in chain looked cold. "Don't touch her. Otherwise, I won't let you leave safely even if I have to risk my life." Su Li picked her slender fingers and teased him slowly, "Hey. Do you care about her at this time? Why were you so arrogant before? Do you really think that you can hurt others unscrupulously because you are dying?" The young man in chain was relieved. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Who are you to her?" Su Li smiled and sat down on Mei Ruhan's seat. She was not afraid of dirtying her expensive black gauze dress. She chuckled and said, you are very smart, at least smarter than I thought. Will the IQ of a man who is in love drop automatically? The young man in chains' face darkened. When did he fall in love? Besides, did he show it so obviously? Who are you? The young man in chain habitually touched his shoulder blade. The movement just now began to hurt again. I am not a big shot. Suli took the medicine bag that Mei Ruhan tidied up and threw it to him. I am just Mei Ruhan's boss. Boss? The young man in chain was slightly surprised. Isn't she a student of the Qinghe girls' school? How can she have a boss? That's really unfortunate. Suli took out the contract and waved it in front of the young man in chain. She just signed it today. Otherwise, where do you think she got the money to buy medicine? Although Suli put away the contract very quickly, the young man still saw Mei Ruhan's handwriting at the bottom of the contract. His face suddenly became gloomy. It was an official contract. Mei Ruhan was just a weak girl. How could she resist? Mei Ruhan sold herself just for 100 taels of silver to treat his wound. The young man in chain looked at Suli's black gauze dress and his lips couldn't help trembling. What kind of shop do you run? What kind of shop do you think it is? Suli cooperated with him and let out a charming laugh, which made the young man in chain's face turn pale instantly. Medicine, take it back. The young man in chain threw the medicine bag fiercely and stared at Suli. Suddenly, he rushed over at the fastest speed. She can't go to the brothel. Give me the contract. Suli stood up and took a few steps back. She dodged lightly, and the young man in chain suddenly missed her. The chain hit the ground with a clatter, which made the young man grimace in pain. He trembled and took a deep breath. Then he slowly got up and knelt on the ground. When he was about to lower his head, his eyebrows were touched by a cold fingertip, which stopped him from falling. He raised his head and saw a pair of eyes as deep as the sea. Don't say something like, beg me. I don't like to hear this kind of words because it is useless. You should always remember it when you work for me. The young man in chain was stunned. Work for you? Suli poked the hard chain, which made the young man frown in pain. Do you want to take this thing with you all your life until you die? Anne. Suli stood up and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She said angrily, when did I say that I would run a brothel? The young man in chain was completely stunned. It took him a long time to react. His eyes were burning with anger. The long conversation just now turned out to be a joke. It's not a joke. Suli seemed to see through the young man in chain and said lightly, Mei Ruhan has become mine. Since she is interested in you, I naturally have to test you. As for the result, I barely pass. The young man in chain snorted and retorted, she is no one's accessory. Suli heard it and immediately laughed. It's not up to you to decide whether she is an accessory or not. Because you will soon become my accessory. Impossible. The young man in chain grinned and sneered, I have lost a lot. Now I am about to lose my life, but you want to deprive me of my last freedom? If I were capable enough, I would not let her work for a cruel person like you. I am cruel. Suli tilted her head and blinked her eyes. Then she chuckled and said, yes, I am cruel, no matter in the previous life or this life. But I have a way to make you follow me willingly. Do you believe it? Oh. The young man in chain struggled to stand up, as if he was defending the last bit of dignity. Then let me see what other means you have. You seem to forget what I said, or didn't you hear it at all? Suli walked to the young man and poked the chain with her fingertips. She said indifferently, I will say it for the last time. Do you want to die with this thing? Or, you don't want to stay with Mei Ruhan for the rest of your life? The young man's expression changed dramatically. Finally, he couldn't maintain his fragile dignity. If he could be with her above board, and not make her sad, his dignity seemed to be nothing. If you don't want to, just pretend that I didn't show up tonight. At this time, Suli clapped her hands and turned around to leave. Immediately, an urgent voice came from behind, wait. Suli turned around lightly. The young man in chain was in a dilemma. Finally, he said, do you really have a way to help me? You don't believe me? Su Li's eyes suddenly lit up with black flames, then I will prove it to you now. Puff. Crack. Su Li's eyes were slightly cold. She stretched out her hand and grabbed and pressed. The chain hanging in front of the young man's chest was immediately pulled out by a great force. It was straightened and then pulled out from his bones. The young man felt a sharp pain in his shoulders, and then his vision went black. He fainted from the pain and fell unconscious. Su Li quickly bent down to stop the bleeding for the young man. But the corner of her mouth was slightly raised, showing a perfect curve. You can't stand such a little pain. It seems that your will is much weaker than I thought. It was an endless dark space. The young man in chain heard the words, Brother Long, from time to time. He didn't know where he was and could only keep running. Finally, he saw a glimmer of light and opened his eyes. Looking at the smooth ceiling, the young man in chain was at a loss. Then he began to think, where am I? Yes. I am in the ruined temple. That woman pulled out my chain directly. Am I dead? The young man in chains slowly turned his eyes and saw Mei Ruhan, who was crying and laughing at the same time. His scattered eyes finally focused. I am not dead. And, he reached out his hand and touched his shoulder. The chain was really gone. It was not a dream. Ruhan, the hoarse voice scared the young man in chain. How long did he sleep? You finally wake up. The girl in white suddenly appeared in front of the window. Although she had changed clothes, the young man in chains still recognized her at a glance. She was the devil-like woman who tortured him inside and outside. Chapter 109. My name is Long. The young man in chain was about to say the pseudonym he had used for many years. But when he saw the expectation in Mei Ruhan's eyes, he couldn't help but sigh and said in a low voice, Luo Chen, my name is Luo Chen. Isn't your surname Long? Mei Ruhan was stunned and didn't respond. Su Li teased softly, little fool, that is certainly his pseudonym. Have you ever seen a fugitive dare to use his real name? He is not stupid. Mei Ruhan scratched her head embarrassedly. She didn't feel disgusted by Su Li's words, although it was the first day that she met Mr. Li. When Luo Chen heard the word fugitive, his eyes became cold unconsciously. He looked at Su Li with full vigilance. Although Su Li removed the chain, he still doubted whether Su Li was an enemy or a friend. Su Li glanced at Luo Chen and was not angry. She said lightly, since you haven't figured out the situation, I will let you have a good rest today. If you still want to resist me after you recover, don't blame me for being merciless. Mei Ruhan, watch him. I don't have so much time to watch him. Then Su Li stepped out of the guest room. She really had something to do. Gong Xiangjuan needed to be carefully observed. She couldn't make any mistakes. After she left, the atmosphere in the room suddenly relaxed. Seeing that there was no one around, Luo Chen finally couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Ruo. Ruhan, do you know where we are? He still remembered the last time when he fainted because of the pain. The means that the horrible girl used was telekinesis, which could only be used by inborn seniors. Was it a stronghold of a sect in the martial arts circle? Did Mei Ruhan become the girl's maid for him? Mei Ruhan heard that Luo Chen called her so intimately. It seemed that after he was rescued by Mr. Li, his cold temperament also changed a lot. Looking at Luo Chen's vigilant face, she couldn't help but laugh. Brother Luo, don't be nervous. This is just a tavern in the Qinghe town. The person who rescued you is Mr. Li, the owner of the tavern, who is the miss just now. I am very good here. The shopkeeper taught me a lot of things that I can't learn in the school. Luo Chen was completely stunned when he heard Mei Ruhan's words. The fact was far from what he imagined. A tavern owner turned out to be an inborn master. Who would believe it? At this time, Mei Ruhan said again, Brother Luo, although Ms. Li is always unforgiving, she is actually very nice. I heard that she is not only good at martial arts but also kind-hearted. She saved the lives of satrap Yan and the dean of the school. Now Dean Gong is still recuperating here. Ms. Li just left in a hurry. She must have gone to take care of the dean. Hearing Mei Ruhan's words, Luo Yichen's mouth twitched slightly. Kind. Would a kind-hearted person directly pull out the chains from his shoulders and leave 2 bloody holes, almost causing him to die of pain? Luo, Mei Li, to say, Luo. Li, to say. Li, to say, Li, Li, to say, Li. Li Long, a young master Li Cheng Li foot in the following days, there was no change in the Lin Li building. There were more and more regular drinkers. The business was booming and the profits were growing. Jean Jintian was resentful. Of course, he wouldn't allow the county governor's mansion to develop so comfortably. He used all the business resources he could use to attack the industry in the hands of Madame Yen and even involved the embroidery workshop. The two sides fought back and forth, and it was very lively. After a while, when Ruomin finally took action, she directly removed Jean Rulan from the register of the Qinghe Girls' School and posted it on the bulletin board of the entire Qinghe town. Jean Rulan and the Jean family became famous. Even the ordinary people in the Qinghe town began to spread the scandal of the Jean family. When Ruomin took action so suddenly that Jean Jintian didn't expect it, his reputation was greatly damaged. Half of his property was seized by Madame of the Yen family at the right time. His vitality was greatly damaged. He was so angry that he vomited blood and almost went to see Jean Cheng Ao directly. At this point, the Yen family won the battle and turned defeat into victory at one stroke. The Jean family was completely blocked by the Yen family in both the official road and the commercial road. The Jean family didn't take any action. The students in Su Li's class were all the children of officials, eunuchs, and merchants. They didn't come to class because of this. She was happy to be quiet. She detoxified Gong Xiangjuan every night and read the last few unique books during the day. Finally, on the 10th night, as soon as Su Li came back to the Lin Li building, Gong Min, who had been waiting at the door, greeted her with joy. Ms. Li. Grandma wakes up. Su Li raised her eyebrows and immediately went to the 3rd floor. Gong Min immediately followed her. Luo Yichen, who could walk, came out of the room with a cane. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but smile. He could see that Ms. Li was really good to her people, but her attitude towards him was extremely bad. Was it because he didn't admit that he was her subordinate, so she treated him as an outsider? Brother Luo, why do you come out? You haven't recovered yet. Go back and have a rest. Mei Ruhan came over with the medicine. When she saw Luo Yichen, she immediately handed the medicine to Chu Qingning, who followed her. Then she hurriedly ran to help Luo Yichen into the room. Luo Yichen's eyes softened. When he looked up and saw Chu Qingning walking into the room, he subconsciously became alert. Chu Qingning looked at Luo Yichen up and down with interest. He said with amazement, Li is really lucky. You recover so fast. You must be a practitioner. Where did she pick you up? Luo Yichen was surprised. Li, Ms. Li. Luo Yichen understood the meaning of Chu Qingning's words and couldn't help but ask, were you also picked up by her? Chu Qingning nodded slightly and sneered, at most, I surrendered voluntarily. Unlike you, you are half dead. Even the prisoner seal has not been removed. Chu Qingning pointed. Luo Yichen looked down and saw that the loose clothes exposed his chest. The scorched prisoner seal was also exposed. Luo Yichen immediately pulled his clothes to cover it. His eyes were cold and vigilant. If Mei Ruhan were not around, he would probably escape from the window without saying anything. Chu Qingning tooted and waved his hand, relax. There are many deserters and fugitives here. You are not the only one. No one will report you. Your reaction reminds me of the past. After staying in the Lin Li building, I finally don't have to hide. Hey, It's good to have someone to protect me. Luo Yichen was stunned, but Chu Qingning also pulled down his clothes, revealing the indistinct character, prisoner, on his right chest. After adjusting his clothes, Chu Qingning smiled and showed his white teeth. I haven't asked you where you come from. I am Chu Qingning from Nanjiang country. Seeing that Chu Qingning was so frank, Luo Yichen unconsciously relaxed and smiled. I am Luo Yichen, Zhu Shougua. When they met for the first time, he had a good impression of Chu Qingning, because this person reminded him of his good friend when they fled together. He didn't care about how Chu Qingning was now. Oh, don't talk anymore. The medicine is getting cold. Mei Ruhan didn't bother to listen to them. She didn't care about the deserters and fugitives. As long as she thought that the people here were good, it was okay. Besides, I want to correct one thing. Brother Luo was picked up by me, not by Mr. Li. He is different from you, Brother Chu. Mei Ruhan said angrily, as if she was declaring her sovereignty. Chu Qingning was stunned at first and then laughed. Although Miss Mei is not from Jianghu, her temperament is like Jianghu. Luo Laosi, you have a good taste. I have a good taste. Mei Ruhan was annoyed. Chu Qingning's words were so annoying. Luo Yichen couldn't help laughing. For the first time, he felt that it was good to stay in the Linli building if he didn't see Mr. Li. But he soon felt strange. Luo Laosi. Why do you call me that? Chu Qingning gnashed his teeth and said with hatred, because someone said to rank the available talents in the winery. Fang Yuan is the first, Fang Mu is the third. You are the fourth, so you are the fourth. So, you are the second. Luo Yichen said subconsciously, and then he realized it. His face was slightly red and he couldn't help laughing. Chu Qingning's face was darker. You are really rebellious. Even the newcomer dares to laugh at me. Su. Mr. Li, I won't let you off. After Chu Qingning's trouble, Luo Yichen finally relaxed a lot. In the conversation with Chu Qingning, he roughly understood the current situation of the Linli building. It turned out that it was not an ordinary winery, but a rising force that was absorbing talents and gradually growing up. He found that except for Mei Ruhan, everyone here had the trace of practicing Xiangong. Even the busy waiter downstairs had the pneuma of cultivation. Although the pneuma was as small as a firefly for him, it was already something in front of ordinary people. If I recover fully, my cultivation will go to a higher level after years of accumulation. But I don't know where I can rank among the three of them. As for Mr. Li. Luo Yichen drank the medicine brought by Mei Ruhan. He felt bitter in his mouth, but he couldn't help showing a trace of fear in his eyes. Young master is really terrible. In the quiet room on the third floor, Su Li and Gong Min walked in and found that Gong Xiangjuan was staggering and trying to get out of bed. Gong Min was shocked and walked over to hold her grandma. Grandma, you just woke up and you are weak. Don't move. Gong Xiangjuan looked at Gong Min, who had lost a lot of weight. She couldn't help but say, Min, you have suffered with me. Grandma, Gong Min murmured. Tears welled up in her eyes and fell down. Gong Xiangjuan sighed and turned to Su Li standing aside. She was about to get out of bed and salute, Mr. Li, although I am in a coma, I know what happened these days. Mr. Li, thank you so much. Su Li quickly stopped Gong Xiangjuan and smiled warmly, Old Dean, you don't have to do this. I just help you as much as I can. You still need half a month to recuperate. You'd better not get out of bed. Well, I will listen to Mr. Li. Gong Xiangjuan lay on the bed and sighed slowly. I have long noticed Wu Yun's behavior. I didn't expect that I would be poisoned. Unfortunately, Min's mother was not as lucky as me. She met Mr. Li. Gong Min held Gong Xiangjuan's hand and shook her head. It's not your fault. Grandma, I am so happy that you can wake up. If even you. Gong Xiangjuan sighed and touched Gong Min's head. She looked up and said, Mr. Li, I think Min has told you about the Gong family. If I really have an accident, I hope Mr. Li can be kind enough to take me in. I can't go back to the Gong family. Gong Min immediately panicked when she heard Gong Xiangjuan's words. Old Dean, you don't have to do this. Su Li waved her hand and gave Gong Min a reassuring look. Your body is fine. As long as you recuperate, you can live for more than 10 years. Chapter 110. As usual, Su Li rushed back to the courtyard of the school from the Linli building and meditated for a night. When she got up in the morning, Mammy Li had prepared a hot breakfast. After she entered the inborn realm, she didn't need food. She could maintain her body by absorbing the nimbus of heaven and earth. But she still liked to drink a mouthful of warm and refreshing millet porridge every morning. The sunshine outside the window shone into the room. It was a very good day with no clouds. Su Li listened to the birds singing in the forest outside the window. Her eyes were shining from time to time. She had been waiting these days. According to Wu Yun's vicious character, she wouldn't retreat directly after she failed. Su Li guessed that the next wave of revenge should be more fierce. But she waited for so many days without any movement, which made her a little uneasy. After all, she only saw the corpse of this person in the previous life. She didn't see her means when she was alive. But since she could control the Gong family in Yunjing, she must not be as easy to deal with as Zhu Yan. When Su Li was thinking, Xiaowu walked quickly from outside the courtyard at this time and presented an invitation. He said, "Lord, this is sent by the College of Martial Arts." Su Li got rid of distractions and reached out to open it. The more she read, the more surprised she was. The gist of the letter was that there was a peerless genius in the College of Martial Arts. He reached the acquired 9th hurdle at the age of 17, which was 2 years earlier than Jin Cheng Ao. He broke the record of the college. Therefore, the College of Martial Arts specially held a small banquet for him and invited all the lecturers and outstanding students of the Qinghe school. After reading, Su Li put down the paper and pondered. It was reasonable to say that such a person was enough to attract the attention of some sects in the martial arts circle and then make the little genius famous. She tried her best but couldn't remember such a person in the previous life. Either the genius didn't appear in the Qinghe town in the previous life, or the genius died too quickly in the previous life and was not as famous as in this life. Su Li showed a little interest in her eyes. The stall of the Linli building had just been opened and was short of people. "Lord, people in the College of Martial Arts always look down on the College of Liberal Arts. Do we still go there?" Seeing Su Li's hesitation, Xiaowu couldn't help but ask. Su Li came to herself and said with a smile, "Although I don't know what exactly they are celebrating, since there is a genius in the school, we should go and have a look. You go downstairs and change into nice clothes and go with me. If you don't have any, you can ask Mammy Li for some money." Xiaowu's face lit up when he heard that, and he immediately went to change clothes. Which man didn't want to be a wuxia? Although it was impossible for him to come into contact with things of that level in his life, it was still good to feast his eyes. In the evening, Su Li sat in the carriage and crossed the high wall of the College of Martial Arts with her original identity for the first time. She came to the martial arts field. Although it was a small banquet, many people came because of the so-called geniuses. There were more than 100 people from the Faculty of Liberal Arts and the Faculty of Martial Arts. There were more than 300 to 400 people in total. An ordinary courtyard would not be able to accommodate such a scene. In the end, the Institute of Martial Arts decided to hold a banquet in the spacious martial arts field. The martial arts field could accommodate 1,000 people practicing martial arts at the same time, so a banquet for 300 to 400 people was naturally more than enough. When Su Li came with Xiaowu, there were already a lot of people in the martial arts field. The steward of the College of Martial Arts, who was guarding outside the martial arts field, was stunned when he saw Su Li's token. Then he suddenly understood. It turned out that she was the 16-year-old genius lecturer. Unfortunately, she was from the Faculty of Liberal Arts. Otherwise, there would be a fierce fight tonight. "Lecturer Su, the lecturer can bring a follower in. Please come in." Seeing Xiaowu followed by Su Li, the steward did not stop them and welcomed them in with a smile. The martial arts field had changed greatly at this moment. The original weapon racks and archery targets were all removed. Instead, there were neat rows of small banquet tables, which almost occupied more than half of the martial arts field. Although Su Li had been running the nothing unusual, her original appearance was extremely delicate. She attracted the attention of many young talents as soon as she came in. Some reckless people even came up to talk to her directly. But when they saw Su Li followed by a follower, they were all shocked. In the Qinghe school, all the people were rich or noble. Personal privileges were certainly useless. Even the daughter of the satrap's mansion did not bring a maid. But this miss who looked younger than the daughter of the satrap's mansion brought a follower, it's lecturer Su. Someone reacted. The young talents who went up to talk to her immediately stopped and looked embarrassed. If they were accused of harassing female lecturers, they didn't want to be expelled from the Qinghe school. Xiaowu followed Su Li and looked around. He was full of excitement. There were many snacks that he had never seen before. The men who came here were gentle and elegant. The women were all ladies with excellent temperament and character. Some of them might even be the future pillars of the Qinghe town and even the Dehan country. He didn't expect that a nobody like him could have the honor to see them. It was all brought to him by Su Li. Xiaowu felt that the best decision he made in his life was undoubtedly to become Su Li's follower. He could see the scenery that was completely different from his previous life. Su Li, you are here. Feng Qingru was standing with Wen Ruomin. She inadvertently glanced at Su Li and immediately ran over. She took Su Li's hand and said with a smile, "Follow me. I will take you to see a person." Then she took Su Li to Wen Ruomin's side without waiting for Su Li's explanation. When they approached, Su Li saw a handsome young man in luxurious clothes standing behind Wen Ruomin. He was talking and laughing with Wen Ruomin and other old deans. He seemed to be very talkative. "Su Li, you are here." Wen Ruomin smiled and took Su Li's hand. She pointed at the young man in luxurious clothes and said, "Let me introduce you. This is Lin Yanqing. Child Lin is the protagonist of this small banquet. He is a genius in the College of Martial Arts. With his talent in martial arts, he is qualified to be a special class lecturer in the College of Martial Arts. He is almost the same as you." Before Su Li said anything, Lin Yanqing cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Grandma Wen, you are overpraising me. I just have the talent and strength. I am not as smart as lecturer Su." Su Li slightly bowed to him as a greeting. Child Lin is too modest. She didn't look at Lin Yanqing. Instead, she looked at the face of the girl behind Lin Yanqing. She seemed to have seen this face somewhere. Lin Yanqing's smile was slightly stagnant. He noticed that Su Li was absent-minded. Immediately, he looked back and said with a smile, "Lecturer Su seems to be interested in my distant cousin. Let me introduce her to you. This is my distant cousin, Lin Xiang. Speaking of which, my cousin lives in a town not far from lecturer Su's hometown. It is really fate." The fact that Su Li came from the Desu town was not a secret. Instead, it was known to everyone. After all, many people had seen the letter from Satrap Yen. Hearing Lin Yanqing's answer, Su Li's eyes flashed slightly. She nodded slightly. She remembered that she had met Lin Xiang once at the birthday banquet of the Yang family. "Ho ho. We old guys will not participate in the conversation between you young people." Seeing Su Li and others chatting, Wen Ruomin and others left with a smile. Soon, there were only 5 people left. When Lin Xiang saw Su Li again, she had mixed feelings in her heart, and her face was a little ugly. Before she came here, she had a premonition that she would meet Su Li, but when she really saw Su Li, she naturally had a different feeling. Fortunately, after Su Zipei cooperated with her to harm Su Li, the news didn't spread at all. Su Li didn't know that it was her who brought the aphrodisiac. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't stand here. "Cousin, why do you look pale? Are you not feeling well?" Lin Yanqing's eyes were sharp. He noticed the abnormality and asked with a smile. Lin Xiang felt cold in her heart. She quickly shook her head and said, "It's just a little cold. Cousin is fine." Her cousin was the first young master of the main family. It was not easy for her to hook up with him. She took the opportunity to come here to broaden her horizons. How could she hide in fear just because she saw Suli? Wouldn't it be revealing that she was hiding something? "It's good that you are fine," Lin Yanqing responded lightly. He turned his head and his eyes became gentle again. He chuckled and said, "I heard that lecturer Su has excellent embroidery skills. You have a unique skill in advanced needlework. I am usually obsessed with practicing martial arts, so I am very curious about it. Lecturer Su, why don't you sit with me and broaden my horizons?" Su Li looked at where Lin Yanqing pointed. He pointed at the most conspicuous seat on the right side of the main seat. "No need." Su Li shook her head and smiled. She declined politely, "You are the main family today. It's reasonable for you to sit in the main seat. It's not appropriate for me to sit in the east seat. If Child Lin is interested, you can come to my class. I have something to talk with the daughter of the Yen family. So, I won't stay here any longer." Su Li bowed and turned away. Lin Yanqing's right hand froze in place and his smile slowly disappeared. Lin Xiang immediately took the opportunity to say angrily, "Cousin, Su Li is too ungrateful. Who does she think she is? It's just that my luck is a little better." "Shut up," Lin Yanqing scolded in a low voice. His tone became indifferent again. "Remember your identity. Don't say such words again. Otherwise, if someone hears it, you can't enter the Qinghe school even with my help." Lin Xiang choked and didn't dare to say another word. At the same time, she looked around in a panic. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, she was relieved. "Almost everyone is here. Follow me to start the banquet. You stand behind me and don't sit down. Otherwise, people will think you are ungrateful." Lin Yanqing ordered in a low voice and didn't look at Lin Xiang anymore. If it weren't for this cousin who helped him in that way, he wouldn't have brought her here and lowered his status for no reason. Lin Xiang said yes and stood behind Lin Yanqing with her head lowered. Tears appeared in her eyes. The jealousy in her heart grew wildly like weeds and soon filled her heart. Why? She was the first miss of the collateral branch of the Lin family. This bitch Su was just born in a small family. Her parents didn't love her and she was almost sent to drown in a pig cage by the officials. Why did everything change after she came to the Qinghe town? Her cousin, who was good at both literature and martial arts, treated her coldly, but he was extremely gentle to Su Li. He even didn't want to say something a little harsh. After the banquet, she could only stand like a maid, but Su Li could sit down and talk with those high officials and nobles. Why on earth? Lin Xiang asked frantically in her heart. She clenched her fists so hard that her knuckles turned pale. Her ears were filled with laughter, but she knew that this excitement was not hers. She was just a pitiful person who was still desperately trying to climb into the circle. But Su Li was already sitting on the throne, looking down at her with a contemptuous look. During the banquet, Yan Hongxiu, Feng Qingru and Su Li sat together, which formed a very beautiful scene and attracted the attention of the people at the other tables. After Su Li pretended to be seriously injured and recuperated in the Yan family for 3 days, the relationship between her and Yan Hongxiu improved a lot. They didn't oppose each other as tit for tat as before. In the past few months, accidents happened frequently. Yan Hongxiu also became more mature. She always carried the silver longbow and faintly exuded a vigorous spirit of a heroine. Su Li, why is the maid behind Child Lin trembling all the time? Is she afraid? Yan Hongxiu came over and whispered, she can't stand such a scene. It seems that the maid of the Lin family is not so good. Su Li smiled and didn't say anything. She thought about it. Lin Xiang's strange reaction reminded her that the culprit of being drugged in the Yang family hadn't been found yet. Chapter 111. After 3 rounds of drinking, the atmosphere of the banquet gradually became warm. I am indebted to all the teachers for holding this banquet just for me. The martial arts circle is hard and dangerous, and I still have a long way to go. Please help me in the future. I, Lin Yanqing, propose a toast to all the teachers and classmates. Lin Yanqing stood up. Although his words were polite, they attracted the applause of the whole hall. The atmosphere of the small banquet was pushed to the climax. Many young girls in the College of Liberal Arts looked at Lin Yanqing with a trace of affection. If they could marry such an excellent Lang Jun, their lives would be worthwhile. Lin Yanqing's eyes fell on Su Li from time to time, hoping to see a trace of intimacy from her eyes. Unfortunately, he found that Su Li not only didn't show any intimacy, but even talked and laughed with Feng Qingru and Yan Hongxiu from beginning to end. She didn't even look at him. Lin Yanqing was slightly disappointed, and then he became more interested. She deserves to be an excellent girl as talented as me. If she shows that kind of eyes to others, she will not be beautiful. Only such a perfect girl can match me and give birth to a more perfect next generation. After dealing with the teachers, Lin Yanqing sat in the seat and drank a glass of wine from time to time. He had begun to think about how to propose marriage. He expected that with the background of the Lin family in the Qinghe town, it was impossible for the Lin family in the Desu town to refuse. Su Li should feel lucky to have such an excellent husband. Su Li was sensitive and naturally noticed Lin Yanqing's eyes. She couldn't help but feel a little troublesome. If the Lin family really wanted to propose marriage, Su Huanli, who had always wanted to develop in the Qinghe town, would definitely not refuse. After an hour, the banquet was over. Su Li went back in advance with the excuse that she was too drunk, so Lin Yanqing didn't have a chance to get close to her. When Lin Yanqing returned home with Lin Xiang, the old butler immediately greeted him and said with a happy face, "First master, you finally come back. You are famous all over the world this time. An hour ago, the doorsill of our house was almost broken by the matchmakers. They are all young ladies from big families in the town." Lin Yanqing frowned and immediately quickened his pace to go in. Lin Xiang immediately followed him, feeling nervous. Her cousin promised her the position of a concubine. If her cousin chose a young lady from a certain family today, then she would have to respect that young lady in the future. Looking at Lin Xiang, who followed Lin Yanqing like a little wife, the old butler shook his head slightly. He didn't know why the master, who was so picky, liked Lin Xiang, who was not good-looking and talented. "Father, return these portraits. I already have a suitable candidate in mind." Lin Xingrong, the master of the Lin family, was shocked by Lin Yanqing's first sentence. Then, the slightly fat master of the Lin family, who was in his 40s, pulled Lin Yanqing's arm and said in a low voice, "Yanqing, you came just in time. I was just about to tell you that I, your father, have already returned all of Matchmaker's albums." Lin Yanqing was a little happy and said in surprise, "Does it mean that you already know which miss I want?" Lin Xingrong chuckled, stroked his beard and nodded, "That lady is definitely worthy of you." "Is she really Su Li?" There was excitement in Lin Yanqing's eyes. He was afraid that his family would dislike Su Li's family background and obstruct him. He didn't expect that his father had arranged everything. Lin Xiang followed Lin Yanqing with a pale face and a flash of resentment in her eyes. If Su Li really lived on her head for the rest of her life, she would rather die directly. Lin Xingrong was stunned and looked strange. "Yanqing, why do you think of her? The girl of the Su family is indeed talented, but she is just talented. It is hard to say whether she can go further in the future. You know her family background. How can she be worthy of our Lin family? I want to say that she is the daughter of the Jin family." "The Jin family? That Jin Rulin?" Lin Yanqing's face was slightly pale. He had been in the Qinghe town for so many years and certainly had seen Jin Rulin. Thinking of her disgusting face, Lin Yanqing almost vomited and couldn't help but refute, "Father, if I remember correctly, Jin Rulin was dropped out of the Qinghe school and expelled from the embroidery workshop. Her reputation is too bad. How can she be worthy of me?" So, Su Li is worthy of you? Lin Xingrong pulled a long face and said, it seems that you are really fascinated by Su Li today. You are not calm. How can you take charge of our Lin family in the future? Let me slowly explain this matter to you. Then, Lin Xingrong glanced at Lin Xiang behind Lin Yanqing. Lin Xiang immediately understood and left, leaving only the father and son of the Lin family. Lin Yanqing glanced at Lin Xiang, who was well behaved, and said coldly, Father, just say it. If you ask me to marry Jean Rulin without a good reason, I will never agree. You. Lin Xingrong was so angry that he stared at his son. But when he thought of his son's brilliant achievements, he couldn't bear to scold him. Finally, he said in a low voice, it is the madam of the Gong family in Yunjing who introduced you. Do you know what it means? The Gong family in Yunjing. Lin Yanqing's face changed a little bit. Yes. Lin Xingrong waved his sleeves and said, do you think your father is stupid? Marrying the Jean family at the cusp of the storm is undoubtedly going against the rules. But if there is a madam of the Gong family, it will be completely different. Lin Xingrong was excited and said, the Gong family is a big aristocratic family, and the madam who came to visit is a relative of the general's mansion in Yunjing. Such a big shot connects us with the Jean family, no matter what her purpose is. If we can unite and bring down the Yan family, the entire Qinghe town will be ours. There is even a slight possibility that you can develop in Yunjing through Madame Gong. Lin Xingrong deserved to be the head of the Lin family. He was eloquent and soon persuaded Lin Yanqing. Your vision should not be limited to the Qinghe town. Yunjing, even the entire Dehan country is the world for you to develop. There is only one Su Li in the Qinghe town, but there may be thousands of Su Li in Yunjing. Our Lin family has no backer in Yunjing. Even if you go there through the martial arts competition, it will be difficult. Now is an opportunity. Son, you should seize it. After hearing his father's words, Lin Yanqing was finally convinced. He couldn't make up his mind for a while. After a long time, he finally raised his head and nodded slightly under Lin Xingrong's slightly anxious eyes. I want to know which family will make the decision if the Jean family and the Lin family unite by marriage. I don't want to be dominated by a woman. The Jean family was much more powerful than the Lin family. Lin Yanqing's worry was reasonable. If the three families worked together to overthrow the Yan family, but the Jean family was the one in charge, wouldn't they lose all their hard-earned money? Lin Xingrong smiled proudly and said, if the Jean family had Jean Cheng Ao, Madame Gong would definitely choose the Jean family. But now the Jean family has no talent. Of course, Madame Gong thinks highly of you. She has clearly said that if you are good enough, she doesn't mind helping you in Yunjing. Lin Yanqing's eyes were shining and his ambition was expanding at this moment. All kinds of glorious scenes flashed through his mind. Finally, he slightly lowered his head and said, I have a narrow vision. Father, you can make the decision. I am willing to marry the daughter of the Jean family. Good. Don't be arrogant and rash. The party committee will accept it. Lin Xingrong was comforted. He had such an excellent son. His life was worthwhile. With Wu Yun as the middleman, the Lin family and the Jean family acted very quickly. The marriage was completed within one day after the news came out. The Yan family didn't react at all. Lin Yanqing married Jean Rulin. In the Linli building, Su Li couldn't help but frown slightly when she received the news. The actions of the two families were so strange that she couldn't figure it out. The Lin family in the Qinghe town was almost the same as the Ran family and the Qin family. It was far less powerful than the Jean family. Moreover, at this time, the Jean family was at a low point. The Lin family's action was almost equivalent to jumping into a fire pit. It was really unwise. There must be something I don't know. Su Li rubbed her eyebrows. The two families acted very quickly and secretly. She couldn't find out anything for a while. She could only see what they would do next. During this time, the Yen family had been digesting the results of the war with peace of mind. Its power had become much larger. Presumably, the Yen family could hold on for a long time in the face of the attacks of the two families. It was enough for her to find out the reason. At this time, there was a slight sound of footsteps outside the door. Fang Yuan arrived in a hurry. He said, "I have found out that Lin Xiang is the miss of the Lin family in the Heli town. She has a bad reputation. It is said in the black market that she often sells aphrodisiacs and has a lot of strange obscene prescriptions." Su Li's eyes flashed when she heard that. She said, "It seems that we have to intervene in the affairs of the Lin family. You go to the black market in the Heli town again and buy some aphrodisiacs sold by Lin Xiang. I need them." Fang Yuan blushed and moved his lips. When he was about to say something, Su Li raised her hand and said, "Is Luo Yichen's injury almost healed?" "Basically healed. I can't see his cultivation clearly. It should be close to mine." A sense of comparison flashed in Fang Yuan's eyes. Chu Qingning's cultivation finally reached the acquired 8th hurdle. He recently broke through to the acquired 9th hurdle. But before he was relieved, Su Li recruited another powerful person. "No, he is at the peak of the acquired hurdle. Of course, you can't see his cultivation clearly." Su Li shook her head slightly and mercilessly exposed Fang Yuan's fantasy. Fang Yuan's pupils shrank slightly and he was immediately silent. He had always been the first senior under Su Li's command. Now he was suddenly surpassed by others. It was not a good feeling. At this time, Su Li's voice came again. She was slightly gentle. "You are only 17 years old, but he is already more than 20 years old. It is not surprising that his cultivation is higher than yours." Fang Yuan was slightly stunned when he heard that. Was she comforting him? "Luo Yichen will go to the black market to buy aphrodisiacs. You go and tell him that he should work since he has eaten my food for a month." Su Li took a piece of paper, wrote a line of words and handed it to Fang Yuan. She said, "The Qinghe town will not be peaceful again. You secretly investigate Wu Yun's movement. Don't alarm them. Ask Chu Qingning to secretly protect Feng Qingru recently." Orders were passed down in an orderly manner. Fang Yuan secretly remembered them and turned to go downstairs. Although the Linli building still operated as a winery on the surface, it seemed that there was a little pyramid differentiation of power levels. In the closed small martial arts field in the backyard, Luo Yichen was sweating profusely. He was waving the long spear in his hand. The long spear was like a dragon pointing at all parts of the wooden figurines accurately. Mei Ruhan finished the task given by Yin Xuedong at a small table on one side. She looked up from time to time. Her eyes were full of sparkling light. She never thought that she would be so happy if she spent every day so ordinary. Luo Yichen was very peaceful with the beautiful woman beside him. After his body recovered, his strength soared to the peak of the acquired hurdle. Although he was not Mr. Li's opponent, he could protect Mei Ruhan from being hurt. At this time, Fang Yuan with a cold face came over and handed a note to Luo Yichen. He turned around and left without saying anything. Chapter 112. Mr. Li finally sent you out to do something? After Fang Yuan left, Mei Ruhan stood up and leaned over. She wanted to see what was written on the note. Luo Yichen immediately put away the note and said seriously, "Mr. Li said to keep it a secret. Don't peek at it. Without further ado, I will set off immediately." "I see." Mei Ruhan heard what he said and nodded obediently. "Go ahead. Be careful on the way." Luo Yichen left quietly, but he was slightly annoyed. The woman definitely did it on purpose. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. Otherwise, he didn't know what Ruhan would think of him. Su Li naturally didn't know that she didn't mean to order and was misunderstood by Luo Yichen. She was still in the attic at the moment, holding the AO sword skills that she got from Jin Cheng AO. This sword skill was regarded as the peerless swordsmanship by people in the martial arts circle in the previous life. She naturally had to practice it, but she didn't practice from right to left like Jin Cheng Ao. Instead, she practiced from left to right and started from the last level. In the previous life, she heard countless rumors about the Ao sword skills. The secrets of it had long been thoroughly understood by people in the martial arts circle. For example, this sword skill was equivalent to a circle. There was no general outline and no words to mark the order of the realm. It seemed that it could be practiced from left to right, from right to left, or from the middle. In the previous life, this sword skill fell into the hands of the beggar from Jin Cheng Ao. The beggar practiced it in a muddle. Coincidentally, he chose the completely opposite way of practicing with Jin Cheng Ao. He accidentally played all kinds of magic of the Ao sword skills and became famous as Sword Marquis in the later generations. In contrast, Jin Cheng Ao was too unlucky. The wrong way of practicing led to defects in his state of mind. The deeper he practiced, the defects would be infinitely magnified. Eventually, he completely lost his humanity and died in madness. Su Li just slightly advanced Jin Cheng Ao's death and intercepted the opportunity of Sword Marquis in the previous life. So, the fate of the little beggar was unknown. Sister Li, are you there? When Su Li was recalling, Fang Ling's clear voice suddenly came from outside the door. The rice wine brewed in the underground cellar is almost full. What should we do? Creak. As soon as Fang Ling finished her words, Su Li dressed as Mr. Li walked out of the room. She said, call Xuedong and Haiden. Let's go to the underground wine cellar together. Fang Ling's blinking eyes suddenly lit up, and she immediately turned around and went downstairs to gather people. Mei Ruhan heard the noise and poked her head out from behind the cabinet. She didn't know where Su Li and others went. She couldn't help but be curious, but she didn't dare to follow them without Mr. Li's permission. Su Li opened the secret door of the underground adytum and came to the underground wine cellar. She immediately smelled the strong aroma of wine. The wine cellar with a radius of 60 square meters was full of shelves. Jars of wine were neatly placed on the shelves. One more thing. Fang Ling counted her fingers and said worriedly, there are not many dried osmanthus in the warehouse. It can last for a month at most. If the new wine is not ready, we won't have anything to sell next month. Su Li nodded slightly and said softly, today is the 7th day of March. There are still more than 4 months before the osmanthus blossoms. Last year, we were short-handed, so it was normal that we didn't have enough osmanthus flowers. We have enough people this year. Remember to go to the osmanthus forest to collect enough osmanthus. Now, I will teach you how to make new wine with bronzeware. Everyone was shocked when they heard the words. They had released the news of strong wine for almost a month, but they didn't take it out for a long time. It caused the Linli building to be criticized recently. Some people even said that osmanthus wine was a flower wine that only effeminate men would drink. Yin Xuedong was very angry. She knew that it was the news released by other wineries. But Su Li had too many things recently, which led to the postponement of the new wine. She could only helplessly watch many drinkers of the Linli building being taken away by other wineries. While thinking, Yin Xuedong had followed Su Li to the huge bronzeware which was as high as a person. Usually, she was busy with the shopkeeper's affairs and didn't look at it carefully. Today, she could look at it carefully. This utensil was composed of 2 parts. There was a groove near the top and bottom of the utensil. At the bottom of the groove, there was a drainage pipe which was connected to another large wine jar. Boss, how to use this thing? Haiden was confused. Not only him, but Yin Xuedong and Fang Ling also touched this weird utensil for the first time. They didn't know how Su Li would use it to make wine. Su Li smiled slightly and waved to Haiden, you bring a few jars of wine and pour them into the utensil. Yin Su, come over and heat the utensil. Keep the fire big. The temperature in the room quickly rose, but it didn't exceed the tolerable limit. Yin Su wiped the hot sweat on his head. He turned his head and saw the dense vents on the wall. He admired Suli more when he realized it. Master's wisdom is really unfathomable. I'm afraid that when designing this building, you have considered the ventilation problem. Otherwise, the temperature in the room will be much higher. Clatter, Haydn didn't let Yin Xuedong and Fang Ling do it. He took people to pour jars of turbid rice wine into the utensil one after another. Soon there were a bunch of empty jars in the corner of the room. Until the utensil was 80% full, Suli let Haydn stop and covered the utensil with a special cover. Then what are we going to do? Haydn still remembered that the process of making osmanthus wine was very tedious. Since it was the new wine of the Linli building, there should be more complicated steps. Suli shook her head and chuckled. Next, we just wait. Haydn was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but scratch his head. He stood aside and watched Yin Su make the fire. He didn't speak. After a while, Fang Ling, who had been staring at the drainage tube, suddenly shouted, "Look, look, the wine is out." Hearing the sound, everyone looked away. They saw a clear liquid flowing out of the drainage tube, which was completely different from the turbid rice wine that was poured in before. Is this wine? It doesn't look like it. Is it water? Everyone was confused and whispered. Suli walked to the big wine jar and filled it with a wine cup. Then she put it on the table beside. Yin Xuedong and others immediately surrounded her. It turns out to be a white wine with amber color. It's so beautiful. Yin Xuedong's eyes brightened. He couldn't help but pick up the wine cup and sniff it. In an instant, a strong fragrance of wine assailed his nose. It's so fragrant. It's different from the osmanthus wine. It's a pure wine fragrance. At this time, Suli took 2 more cups of wine and put them on the table. She looked at Haydn and others who were suppressing the wine worms in their stomachs with a faint smile. Drink it? As long as you don't get drunk after drinking this cup, I won't deduct your wages. Boss, do you mean it? Haydn asked with a happy face. He had a good capacity for liquor. It was impossible for him to get drunk after tasting a cup of wine. Yin Xuedong was vigilant and gently put down the wine cup. She had been cheated by Suli. Every time Suli showed such an expression, she must not be too confident about her ability. When did I go back on my words? Suli signaled Haydn and others with her eyes. Drink it if you want. After today, there won't be such a good thing. Thank you for the reward, boss. Haydn didn't doubt her and immediately picked up the wine cup and drank it up. Then Yin Xuedong and Fang Ling saw his face became red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Cough, cough. It's so spicy. Haydn scratched his throat and coughed violently. It seemed that what he drank just now was dynamite. The moment that glass of wine fell into his stomach, it immediately erupted with an unimaginable power. It was like a red-hot knife directly chopping into his heart, and also like a ball of fire burning. The pain was bone-piercing, but it was also inexplicably refreshing. So cool. Haydn's cheeks were red, and he hiccuped with a silly smile on his face. Then he let out an intoxicated sigh. Then he fell to the ground with a plop and was unconscious. Fang Ling was so scared that she jumped back and almost bumped into Yin Su, who climbed out from behind the stove. Yin Xuedong stepped aside and looked at Haydn lying flat on the ground, snoring slightly. She smiled as she had expected. He really couldn't stand a cup of wine. Seeing this, the rest of the people immediately put down the wine cup and didn't dare to drink. But looking at Haydn's happy face, they were curious about the taste of the wine. Suli gently kicked Haydn, who was sleeping on the ground. She shook her head and smiled. This is the result of taking advantage of others. You should remember it. Xuedong, remember it and deduct his salary for this month. Yin Xuedong couldn't help but stick out her tongue and silently remember it. She could already imagine Haydn's crying look when he woke up. At this time, Suli had filled a whole pot of wine. She shook it and said with a smile, the wine is called the Yehua wine. Like the osmanthus wine, it is divided into 3 grades. The raw pulp is not sold. Otherwise, ordinary people will die of drinking it and the Linli building will get into trouble. The first grade of the Liehua wine is diluted to 150%. As for the next 2 grades and the price, Xuedong, you can decide it by yourself. Yin Xuedong immediately took out a notebook and wrote it down for fear of missing something. Her worry about the new wine had already disappeared. The Liehua spirits was really as strong as its name. Even Haydn was drunk after drinking only 1 cup. Didn't the mediocre winery owners who liked to make irresponsible remarks say that the spirits of the Linli building were sissy? She would like to see who was the sissy tomorrow. After a while, Haydn was carried to rest, and Yin Su returned to the stove to continue burning. Since the new wine would be released tomorrow, it was natural to make more wine. Yin Xuedong scratched on the paper and thought about the price of the new wine. When she saw Su Li put on the veil again and was about to go out of the cellar, she suddenly thought of something and quickly stopped Su Li. Wait, Su Li, there is still one thing I don't understand. What? Su Li turned around and saw Yin Xuedong took her hand and walked to another addendum. She asked, Su Li, how to deal with Mei Ruhan. Since you don't want to show your true face in front of her, it means that you don't believe her. There are many secrets in the winery that can't be confessed. What's the use of continuing to cultivate her? Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and said, it's not that I don't believe her, but she is different from us. Different? What's different? Yin Xuedong subconsciously asked. Then she suddenly thought of something. Her eyes were slightly dim and she became silent. Su Li smiled in a low voice with a meaning that Yin Xuedong couldn't understand. She said, when she grows up, I will give her a chance to make a choice. She has too little experience. It's too early for her to make a choice now. Yin Xuedong was stunned and watched Su Li turn around and leave with the flagon. She didn't know what to feel for a while. Chapter 113. In the early morning of the next day, the Linli building opened the door to welcome guests as usual. In the morning, the business was very quiet. Only a few drunkards came to the door. Lao Li staggered into the door with a flagon. He exuded the fragrance of osmanthus. Since he drank the osmanthus wine that day, he became a loyal supporter of the Linli building. No matter what the rumors were, he always maintained absolute trust in the Linli building. Even when other wineries spread unfavorable rumors, he took a large number of people to other wineries to seek justice for the Linli building. Mr. Li, you are here. Please sit down. The new wine is on the market today. Would you like to have a taste? When the waiter saw Lao Li, he immediately greeted him and said enthusiastically. He was the #1 regular customer of the Linli building. Almost half of the returning customers in the store were brought by him. Hiccup. Give me the usual wine. Lao Li was still a little confused. He said intermittently. Suddenly, he caught the keyword of the waiter. He immediately became sober and said with surprise, what did you say? The new wine is on the market. When the waiter saw Lao Li's reaction, he immediately laughed cheerfully. He bent sideways and said, look. Lao Li immediately looked at the waiter and saw that there were 3 new wooden signs on the wall behind the counter. They were hanging next to the osmanthus wine. The first-class Liehua wine is as fierce as fire. You will be drunk with a cup of wine. The price is 10,000 taels per pot. The second-class Liehua wine is mellow and sweet. It is a rare wine. The price is 100 taels per pot. The third-class Liehua wine is pure and transparent. It is fragrant and warm. The price is 1,000 taels per pot. After reading it, Lao Li couldn't help but wipe his eyes and look again. He was right. The price of the new wine of the Linli building was so low. With the osmanthus wine, almost all the people in the Qinghe town knew that the wine of the Linli building was particularly expensive. It was almost 10 times more expensive than that of ordinary wineries. However, if the price of the first-class and second-class Liehua wine was ignored, the price of the third-class Liehua wine was completely acceptable. Are those wineries right? The Linli building can't produce new wine, so they introduce the wine of ordinary wineries? Lao Li frowned. If so, he would rather the Linli building only sell osmanthus wine than lower the level of the Linli building. With this idea, Lao Li was quite perturbed and ordered a pot of third-class Liehua wine and a bowl of the simplest dish, peanuts. After a short and long wait, Yin Shuadong personally brought over the blazer wine. Lao Li was instantly overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, and he was just about to stand up when he was stopped by Yin Shuadong. Mr. Li, you are an old customer of the Linli building. Thank you for taking care of the Linli building. I see that your body and bones are weak, the Liehua wine is too strong, even if it's third class. I advise you to drink less. After that, Yin Shuadong turned around and left. Although she had diluted the raw pulp according to Su Li's instructions, she was still afraid of accidents, so she couldn't help but come to remind Su Li. Hearing the shopkeeper's concern, old Li's heart warmed. Soon after, his gaze fell onto the wine pot in front of him and he lightly poured a cup. The clear and transparent amber-colored wine flowed into the cup, causing old Li to be stunned. The Inferno wasn't an ordinary turbid wine. It was as clear and transparent as the osmanthus wine, and its color was much lighter than the osmanthus wine. He moved closer to smell it. The rich and mellow fragrance of the wine assailed his nostrils. It was the fragrance of the wine itself, not the fragrance of any flowers. Lao Li's eyes were shining, and he was excited to drink. The Linli building really didn't let him down. They really developed the pure wine that belonged to the Linli building. Gulp. Old Li raised his wine cup and drank it in one gulp. The spicy wine immediately poured down his throat, stimulating Old Li to the point he couldn't help but choke and cough. He didn't expect that merely the lowest grade of Liehua spirits would be so spicy and strong. After the stimulation, a warm feeling rose in Old Li's stomach, as if there was really a ball of fire burning in his abdomen. His limbs, which had been cold since he woke up, immediately warmed up, and even his back was slightly sweating. So it turns out that when the wine is strong, it can really drive away the coldness like raging fire. Liehua wine, wonderful. Wonderful. Old Li drank by himself in high spirits. Soon, his face turned red and he was drunk. Just then, a middle-aged man walked into the shop. When the man saw Old Li, he immediately quickened his pace and sat to the side. Old Li, you are really drinking here? Of course, I will live in the Linli building for the rest of my life. What are you doing here? Seeing that Old Li was a little tongue-tied, his face was red, and his eyes were wandering. The middle-aged man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, You are an old drunkard. How can you get drunk after drinking the light osmanthus wine? Don't you boast that you can drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk? Well, don't pretend. I just found a new winery. The wine there is much stronger than osmanthus wine. Hurry up and come with me. No. I won't go. Old Li flicked his sleeves, and the middle-aged man looked a little embarrassed. He came to invite Old Li to drink good wine with good intentions, but Old Li didn't know what was good for him. At this time, Old Li picked up the flagon at hand and approached the middle-aged man. He smirked and said, You, smell it. If I drink the osmanthus wine, I promise you that I will never come to the Linli building in my life. The middle-aged man heard the words and laughed. He immediately said, Old Li, you are finally enlightened. The osmanthus wine is simply a little thing for women to drink. We men should drink something exciting. Then he was about to put down the flagon, but at this time, a trace of mellow fragrance floated from the spout of the flagon. Well? This is. The middle-aged man couldn't help but taste it, and then, an hour later, the two drunkards fell down at the table. In order not to affect the business of the shop, Yin Shuadong quickly ordered the waiter to move them to the guest room to rest. When the middle-aged man was moved, he was alarmed and immediately began to talk nonsense. The biggest mistake I, Chong Lin, have made in my entire life was listening to rumors. I actually thought that the Linli building could not make other good wine except osmanthus wine. Raging fire. This wine is really wild like a horse, and it should show the true colors of a man. I really want to taste the wine that costs 10,000 taels per pot. Burp, Lin Chang's voice became lower and gradually could not be heard. The two waiters snickered and said nothing. At the same time, a strong sense of pride and belonging rose in their hearts. The taste of the raging fire wine was excellent. The drinkers spread the news. Soon, all the drinkers in the Qinghe town knew that the new wine of the Linli building was on the market. This time, it was a real mellow wine without any fancy things. Moreover, the price was almost the same as that of other wineries. It was quite cheap. When the old drinkers of the Linli building heard the news, they all took their drinking tools to buy wine, for fear that it would be sold out if they were late. The surging flow of people turned from the main street to the second-class street, which became a wonder in the Qinghe town. When Yan Shixuan heard the news, he immediately sent officers and soldiers to maintain order and express his appreciation. Chu Qingning stood beside the cabinet and looked at the long line of people buying wine to the end of the street. He couldn't help but say, "Xuedong, the price you said is too low. We can't earn enough. Aren't you afraid that Suli will blame you?" Yin Xuedong's eyes flashed with slyness. She whispered with a smile, "Don't worry. It's just temporary. It won't be long before someone begs me to increase the price. Believe it or not." Chu Qingning's face trembled slightly. He looked around with a little panic and then said, "Don't you find that your words and deeds are becoming more and more like Suli? Don't be like that tigress. You know that before." "Know what?" Su Li's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Chu Qingning's face instantly froze. He slowly turned around and saw Su Li dressed as Mr. Li. He could only smile and flatter. "Before, you destroyed the tiger village with your hands. You are really heroic. I admire you very much." Ha ha ha, looking at Chu Qingning's flattering expression, Yin Xuedong laughed happily. She saw the rule. Every time Chu Qingning said something bad, it would be heard by people who shouldn't listen. If there was a so-called special ability in the world, Chu Qingning's special ability was probably the most unlucky one. Su Li's reaction was indifferent. She no longer paid attention to Chu Qingning, who was joking. She looked at Yin Xuedong with undisguised appreciation in her eyes and said, "Xuedong, you did a good job this time." "Yes." Yin Xuedong's eyes brightened. Hearing Su Li's praise, she seemed to be full of vigor and inexhaustible strength. It was the first time for her to be praised by Su Li like this. The Linli building was busy until late at night. The last drinker was sent away and the Linli building was closed. Yin Xuedong was so excited that she couldn't sleep. Today, the income of the Linli building was not much. It could even be said that it had regressed compared to before. The process of making the Liehua spirits was not complicated, and the raw materials were not as expensive as the osmanthus wine. However, the price she set was quite low, which led to a meager profit. But Yin Xuedong believed that everything was temporary. In the night, Su Li sat on the windowsill of the attic with a pot of wine hanging on her side. Her pitch-black eyes were looking at the equally pitch-black night, and no one knew what she was thinking. Tap, tap, Fang Yuan pushed the door open and didn't see anyone at the desk. He sniffed and turned his eyes to see Su Li's lazy appearance. He couldn't help but frown. "Why do you start to drink?" Su Li tilted her head and looked into the room. She smiled and said, "When did I not drink? But there was no wine to drink before. Now I can barely drink the Liehua spirits." Fang Yuan said helplessly, "But you can't drink the raw wine as water. Even if you are in the inborn realm, you will be drunk." Su Li smiled silently, and her cheeks turned pink. The girl under the moonlight seemed to exude a mysterious and tempting atmosphere. At this moment, Fang Yuan's heart beat faster and his ears turned red. In a hazy mind, he vaguely began to realize that it might be a mistake to be tempted, but everything was out of his control. Fang Yuan turned his eyes away and stopped looking at Su Li. He forced his voice to calm down. There is no movement from Wu Yun. It seems that after the killer died last time, she was afraid to take action. When it came to business, the pink on Su Li's face gradually faded, and her eyes became clear. She took a deep breath and said, "No, I can understand Wu Yun's eyes. She is not a timid person. Maybe she has started to act, and we don't know it." Fang Yuan was surprised. It seemed that Su Li had never paid so much attention to a person, especially a woman. Even when she dealt with Ma'am Su Chui in the Desu town, she never showed such a cautious expression. The deep courtyard of a rich and powerful family is a good place to practice intrigue. Su Li's eyes were gloomy. It's like raising poisonous insects. The Gong family is equivalent to a poisonous insect field, and Wu Yun is the last surviving king of poisonous insects. Do you think the king of poisonous insects is easy to deal with? Fang Yuan looked serious and no longer dared to despise Wu Yun. His Fang family was also an aristocratic family of the poisonous insect clan. How could he not know the power of the king of poisonous insects? That's it. But our intelligence ability is limited. If Wu Yun knows to be cautious, it will be a waste of time for us to investigate. Su Li jumped down from the windowsill and said, "Prepare for these 2 days and go with me." At this time, Fang Yuan frowned slightly. What if something happened to the Linli building at such a critical moment? Chapter 114. For 3 days in a row, the transaction volume of the Linli building was high. In addition, Yin Xuedong introduced the strategy of limiting the purchase, so those businessmen who wanted to buy low and sell high could not make profits. The Yehua spirits were too good and cheap. Even if it was a third-class spirit, its value was far more than 1 tael of silver. The ordinary wineries in the Qinghe town were not competitive at all. In just 3 days, their profits shrank by more than half. If it went on like this, they would not be far from bankruptcy. The winery owners were all panicked. When they thought of what they had done before, they were more afraid. The Linli building is simply ruthless. It's too vicious. If I had known it, I wouldn't have spread rumors everywhere. Now, if they really developed the spirits, how could we survive? Why don't you think about the consequences of what you have done? Now we are in trouble with you. How will you compensate us? Ho ho. You know to speak at this time. You didn't stop us when we did it before. Seeing that a group of winery owners were about to fight, the old man sitting in the middle finally couldn't help but hit the table and said angrily, "Shut up." In an instant, the voice in the room was quiet. The old man obviously had a high reputation in this group. He glanced at the people present with his eyes full of vicissitudes and said, "Everyone, the business world is like a battlefield. The winner takes all, and the loser takes all." Speaking of this, the old man sighed and said, "Mo Hengong is inferior to the Linli building in the winemaking skill. The Qinghe winery is not as good as the Linli building. There is nothing to talk about. I don't want to talk about the dirty things you have done before. The Linli building is annoyed by you and deliberately lowers the price so that you have no business to do. In my opinion, it is reasonable. But, if it goes on like this, it will affect the prosperity of the winemaking industry in the Qinghe town. So, I propose to reconcile with Mr. Li through Satrap Yen. What do you think?" Mo Hengong's words were reasonable and made everyone silent. They also knew that they were wrong. But if they apologized to a young woman who was more than 10 years younger than them, wasn't it too difficult? Mo Hengong was not in a hurry. He sat there with his eyes closed, waiting for everyone's response. After an unknown period of time, a dejected owner finally stood up and sighed. "I agree with Venerable Mo's proposal. This winery is my life. If it's gone, my family will have nothing to eat. A mistake is a mistake, there's nothing to be ashamed of. Someone took the lead to admit defeat. Immediately, an acquaintance nodded and said, I also agree. I was wrong this time. I should give Mr. Lee an explanation. Not bad. Me too. I don't agree. What right does a silly little girl have to make me apologize? After a heated discussion, Mo Hungong took 90% of the people to the county governor's mansion, leaving only a few particularly vile wineries still stubbornly resisting. They knew what they had done, and even if they went to the county governor for help, they would not necessarily be forgiven. In that case, why would they go and humiliate themselves? County Governor Yen was under great pressure from the Jean family and the Lin family. He was surprised when a group of winery owners suddenly came to him. Yes, how could I forget that I can also ask Mr. Lee for help? Yen Shixuan was delighted. Many industries of the Yen family were under vicious competition, so he had to do business at a loss. He had lost hundreds of thousands of taels these days, and the liquidity was about to run out. Venerable Mo, I will negotiate with Mr. Lee on this matter. However, I think that if you want to show your sincerity, it's better to let the winery owners jointly write a letter of apology and post it on the bulletin board to restore the credibility of the Linley building. In this way, the Linley building will definitely let bygones be bygones and will not be ruthless. As soon as he said that, the faces of the winery owners who followed him changed. Mo Hungong's expression did not change. He nodded naturally and said, it should be so. I also have the same idea. Mr. Lee is a divine doctor and kind-hearted. This time, he must be angry. If there is a letter of apology, it is enough to appease Mr. Lee's anger. Hearing that, Yen Shixuan laughed loudly and said, Venerable Mo, you are really well informed. Then he turned his eyes to a group of winery owners. His face suddenly became cold and he said, Mr. Lee once saved my son's life. To be honest, if you used violent means, I would have already taken action. It can be regarded as a favor to Mr. Lee. Now, you are not even willing to write a letter of apology. Do you really want to taste the feeling of being in prison? Hearing that, the winery owners all turned pale and said that they dared not. They couldn't get in touch with people like Satrap Yen. How could they know that Mr. Lee had other identities? If they had known that the satrap's mansion was behind the Linley building, they would not have dared to offend the Linley building. Lord, we have written a letter of apology. Please calm down. Lord, please calm down. By the way, the Qingzhou Winery and the Wenxi Winery are not here. They are the culprits who spread the rumors. Seeing that the winery owners changed their minds instantly, Yen Shixuan sneered in his heart. But he still looked calm and said lightly, you just do your own things. Don't get involved in the affairs of the two wineries. Under the instruction of Mo Hungong, a group of winery owners tremblingly wrote a letter of apology and posted it on the most conspicuous place on the bulletin board. Soon, it attracted the attention of the people in the city. For a time, it was talked about with relish. It turns out that the rumors of the Linley building are false. The other wineries are jealous and spread the rumors. They are really irrational. Satrap Yen is really a good official. Ordinary people pointed at it and gossiped. But many people also noticed the hidden message of the letter of apology. The satrap's mansion is behind the Linley building. I didn't expect that Mr. Lee is so influential that even Satrap Yen has to take the initiative to make friends. I am afraid that the price of the Liehua spirits will rise soon. Don't you see that the winery owners are so anxious that they even take out a joint letter of apology? When Yin Xuedong heard the news, she felt relieved and smiled. This time, with the help of Satrap Yen, the plan for the Liehua spirits was a great success. In the future, no one would doubt the fact that the Linley building was the first winery in the Qinghe town. Half a day after the notice came out, the Linley building quickly changed the wooden sign. The price of all grades of the Liehua spirits was increased by 10 times, which was the same price as the osmanthus wine. The winery owners who got the news were relieved. Finally, their industry was saved. The drinkers cursed, not the Linley building, but the wineries. If the wineries hadn't forced them, the Linley building would not have changed the price back to the original price. But now, they had no ability to change the price of the Linley building. They could only complain and continue to drink in the Linley building. When other wineries were celebrating, Yen Shushuan secretly came to the Linley building. Loan? Su Li raised her eyebrows and said to Yen Shushuan with a smile, "Satrap Yen, are you kidding? With the financial accumulation of the Yen family for many years, it should be able to compete with the Jin family and the Lin family for half a month, right?" Yen Shushuan was shocked when he heard the words. Then, he found that Ms. Li seemed to know the details of the aristocratic families in the Qinghe town too well. Ms. Li could even guess the foundation of their families. But he had come here and was ready to tell the whole story. So, Yen Shushuan didn't go into it. She sighed and explained, "Ms. Li, you don't know that the accumulation of the Jin family and the Lin family is indeed more than that of the Yen family, but not too much. Logically speaking, I can hold on for half a month or even longer. But this time is very different." Yen Shushuan frowned and thought of the impact of his industry these days. He said, "The Jin family and the Lin family are completely desperate. They lower the price indiscriminately, which leads to the serious loss of liquidity of the Yen family. I suspect that there are other families involved. However, I have checked the capital flow of the Ran family and the Qin family these days, but they didn't help us." Su Li's eyes flashed and she said in a low voice, "Other families?" "Yes." Yen Shushuan's face was full of certainty. "Moreover, it's a force with great financial resources. If it's really only the Jin clan and the Lin clan, they'll destroy themselves before the Yen clan falls. It doesn't make sense at all." Su Li thought and suddenly said, "Satrap Yen, have you heard of the name Wu Yun?" Yen Shushuan was shocked and said, "Of course I have." "What do you mean?" "Nothing. I just asked casually." Su Li seemed to ask casually and immediately changed the topic, "Satrap Yen, how much are you going to borrow today?" Yen Shushuan secretly remembered the name, Wu Yun. Then, he raised his head and said earnestly, "The more, the better. I don't believe that the help of the people behind the Jin family and the Lin family is infinite. As long as I can hold on, the final victory will be mine. Here, I also promise you that I will share the fruits of victory with you and will never embezzle them." Su Li smiled and said, "Since Satrap Yen said so, I have no reason not to help you. It is enough for the Linley building to open a winery. It doesn't need too many industries. But I will have more and more people in the future. The place of the Linley building is a little small. If Satrap Yen can allocate the residents of the Jin family to the Linley building, I will be very grateful." Yen Shushuan's pupils shrank slightly. Why did he feel that Ms. Li was determined to get the residents of the Jin family? Did she also want to intervene in this matter? However, no matter what the meaning of the words was, as long as the Yen family could win, everything else was not a problem. "Ms. Li, you are really serious. If I can really stand in the end, the residents of the Jin family will be yours to live." In the room, there was a cheerful laughter of an old man and a young man. After 5 minutes, Yen Shushuan took a heavy bag of banknotes and left the Linley building in horror. A total of 1 million circulating taels. Is it the profit of the Linley building in the past 6 months or the foundation of the Linley building? He used to be a person in the martial arts circle. The more he thought about Su Li, the more frightened he was. He was so scared that he didn't dare to think about it. At night, in the martial arts field of the school, Yan Hongxiu stroked the silver longbow with joy on her face. Recently, she seemed to be able to feel the emotion of the silver bow. It seemed that the silver bow was no longer a dead thing, but a living person who could communicate with her. "Can you finally communicate with the spiritual bow preliminarily?" A strange voice suddenly came from behind. Yan Hongxiu immediately turned around and said with surprise, "Immortal Master, you are here." Su Li nodded gently and said, "Now try to pull the bow." Yan Hongxiu immediately stood up straight and pulled the bowstring according to her words. She immediately pulled the bowstring a little bit. Although the extent was not obvious, Yan Hongxiu was ecstatic. She couldn't pull the bowstring at all before. It seemed that the bowstring of the silver bow was simply made of stone and had no elasticity at all. Very good. Su Li praised her generously. You have been preliminarily recognized by the spiritual bow. Next, let your father buy more blood-enriching herbs and put them at home. Yan Hongxiu was stunned and looked confused. What did the blood-enriching herbs have to do with her archery practice? Next, you need to smear the spiritual bow with your own blood every day. You can't rest for a day. I will teach you a pithy formula. When you smear the blood, you can't stop it. Do you understand? Yan Hongxiu trembled when she heard it. What was this strange method? She should use her blood to control the longbow. The method of blood refining. Chapter 115. Yan Hongxiu bit her lower lip and lowered her head. Her father was a third-grade official in the Dahan country. Her mother came from a family of scholars and merchants. She didn't have to worry about food and clothing since she was a child. She was constantly instilled with traditional ideas by her mother and sisters. But her character still followed her father's. She had the same desire for martial arts as her third brother. She longed for the chivalrous and free Jianghu that her brother said. If she couldn't pull the bow, would she really be willing to marry someone else's wife when she reached the age where she could take care of her husband and children and be trapped in a small world for the rest of her life? No. She was not willing. Yan Hongxiu raised her head and her eyes became firm again. She said, Immortal Master, please teach me the pithy formula. Su Li slightly pursed her lips and said coldly, Have you really thought it through? You are too young. What you see and yearn for is not what you want. Even so, do you still want to continue? Yan Hongxiu still nodded and said, I don't know whether it is right or not. But if I give up now, I will regret it later. In this case, I can't flinch. Then Yan Hongxiu stared at Su Li closely. Su Li's cold tone suddenly changed and became lively. She said, It is rare that you have such awareness at such a young age. In this case, I will teach you the pithy formula now. Yes, Immortal Master. Yan Hongxiu nodded happily and finally returned to her usual smile. Looking at the pretty girl holding the long bow in front of her, Su Li showed a meaningful smile. The method of blood refinement was a commonly used method in the martial arts world to refine weapons, but not everyone could succeed in this method. Moreover, if one refined a spiritual weapon that was much higher than his cultivation, he was likely to suffer a backlash and die or be disabled. However, Su Li believed that Yan Hongxiu could safely get through the danger. After all, under the torture of Jin Cheng Ao in the previous life, Yan Hongxiu refined the spiritual bow with her heart blood. She completely mastered the spiritual bow in only 3 days and almost killed Jin Cheng Ao. Unfortunately, she lost too much heart blood. Yan Hongxiu didn't shoot the last arrow and left first. At that time, Su Li had speculated that the bow must be the ancestral heirloom of the Yan family, and the snow vein in Yan Hongxiu's body was likely to be very suitable for the bow. Otherwise, even if she worked hard, it was impossible for her to completely master the killing weapon that was a big realm beyond her cultivation in just 3 days. In this life, she asked Yan Hongxiu to choose a safer method of blood refining. Although it was a little slow, Yan Hongxiu would be able to regain the brilliance of her previous life in time. You died prematurely in your previous life and didn't have the chance to shine in the martial arts world. Let me help you in this life. Consider it a return gift from the Yan clan for helping me wipe out the Jin clan. In the warm night breeze, white clothes fluttered, and various fates were silently changing in the silence. Early the next morning, Su Li appeared in Wen Ruomin's yard. You want to go out and relax? Hearing Su Li's words, Wen Ruomin couldn't help but frown slightly. She couldn't help but worry, the Qinghe town is not peaceful these days. Your class is also delayed because of this. I don't object to you going out, but how are we going to solve the problem of safety? Thank you for your concern, Dean. Su Li seemed to have a well-thought-out plan and said softly, I also know my situation. Yesterday, I have invited bodyguards from the Tianya house to go with me. Besides, there are also Xiaowu and Dadian. I believe that there will be no problem. The bodyguards of the Tianya house are really powerful. When Ruomin immediately felt relieved and smiled, in the past 6 months, you spent all day here except going back home. You really should go out for a walk. It happens that Dean Gong has just recovered from her illness and is asking me to go to class. You can relax and don't worry about the schedule. Dean, Su Li looked grateful and said, it's really my luck to meet Dean Wen. Don't worry, Dean. I just want to go to the Qinghe River to relax. I believe that I will come back within a month. That's good. The scenery of the Qinghe River is good. You should go and have a look. When Ruomin smiled and took out an amulet from her arms and gave it to Su Li, this is the amulet I asked from the temple. Take it and be careful on the way. Su Li quickly retreated and felt flattered. She said, how can I take it? Dean, keep it with you. Just take it. When Ruomin pretended to be unhappy and said, nothing will happen to me if I stay in the school. If you care about it, you can give it back to me when you come back. Take it with ease. Su Li hesitated for a moment and finally listened to Wen Ruomin. She put the amulet close to her body and was told to pay attention to the trifles on the way. Then she was let out of the yard. In front of the school, Mammy Li was waiting beside the carriage with a small bag. Xiaowu and Datian were both excited and checked whether the food prepared for the horses was enough. After a while, Su Li walked out of the school. When she saw Mammy Li and others waiting, she couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. She finally saw Wen Ruomin's nagging ability. If she didn't say that the carriage was waiting in front of the school, she didn't know how long she would be pulled by Wen Ruomin. However, she didn't feel tired of this level of verbosity. Instead, she felt a faint warmth lingering in her heart. If it were in the previous life, she wouldn't be shaken at all. Compared with the time when she was just reborn, she seems to be more and more like a normal person. Is it good or bad? Su Li sighed softly and sat in the carriage. Xiaowu immediately drove away from the school. When the carriage left the Qinghe town, Xiaowu was about to ask Su Li where the so-called guards were. Suddenly, he heard the sound of hooves behind him. In the blink of an eye, 4 horses followed. There were 3 men and 1 woman on the horses. All of them wore masks and their faces couldn't be seen clearly. They didn't look like guards. They were more likely to be killers. Xiaowu panicked and was about to turn around and escape. But he heard Su Li's voice from behind, don't panic. The 4 of them are all guards invited by me. You can continue to go as usual. Xiaowu couldn't help but be stunned when he heard the words. He couldn't help but look at the horse walking in the front. The voice of the young man on the horse immediately came from behind the mask, you go now. I will follow and protect you all the way. Hearing the voice, Xiaowu was finally sure that they were not killers. Then, an unprecedented sense of security hit his whole body. With the protection of such 4 seemingly powerful people, it would be no problem for them to go back to their hometown. After a whole day's journey, there was no official road in the end of the carriage. The mountain road between the slope was very rugged. After dark, they couldn't see the road clearly. The horses also couldn't bear it. So, they could only clear a relatively flat open space and temporarily rest for the night. Xiaowu saw Fang Yuan and others easily moved the stones and cleared all the shrubs around quickly. He couldn't help but be speechless. As expected, they deserved to be the bodyguards of the Tianya house. The speed of clearing the camp was really professional. Su Li sat on a stone and watched quietly. A faint fluorescent light flashed in her eyes. Whether it was Fang Yuan, Chu Qingning, Fang Mu, or Yin Xuetong, they all had been on the battlefield and killed enemies. Setting up a camp was the basic skill of marching. They were naturally familiar with it. Before it was completely dark, Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning had already set up all the tents. Yin Xuedong and Fang Mu also picked up bundles of firewood. After making a fire, the surrounding site was suddenly illuminated. The fire was very warm on their faces. Xiao Wu took out the pot from the carriage and put it on the fire. He poured water into it. When the pot opened, he put in the dried jerky. Soon, the smell of meat floated out of the pot. He first filled a bowl for Su Li, and then walked to Fang Yuan with the bowl in his hand. "Eldest brother, you worked hard on the road. Here you are." Looking at Xiao Wu's respectful expression with a trace of fear, Fang Yuan smiled slightly. He took the soup bowl and lifted half of his mask to drink. Su Li didn't allow him to show his real face. It was not a big deal to only show his mouth, right? Chu Qingning and other 2 people immediately followed him and lifted their masks to drink. Xiao Wu was stunned to see this scene. Why didn't this group of people take off their masks even when eating? He also wanted to see what the 4 people looked like. It was very peaceful at night, and there was only the crackling sound of burning firewood. After all, Xiao Wu, Dadian and Mammy Li were ordinary people. After a day of hard work and eating and drinking, they immediately felt sleepy. It didn't take long for them to get into the tent and sleep. After making sure that the 3 people fell asleep, Fang Yuan and others took off their masks to breathe. Su Li picked up the burning firewood with a branch and asked, "How about the arrangement before we left?" Chu Qingning glanced at the tent behind him and signaled Yin Xuedong to speak. Yin Xuedong organized her words and whispered, "Everything is arranged. The girl is very flustered. But Luo Yichen will come back soon. I believe that there will be no big trouble." Su Li said, and narrowed her eyes slightly. "You are all from aristocratic families and have extraordinary backgrounds. Do you think, if the Linli building wants to fight with forces like the royal family of the Nanjiang country in the future, what are the chances of winning?" The 4 people were shocked when they heard the words, and their expressions were different. Only Fang Yuan's expression didn't change. He had already seen all kinds of magic of Su Li. It was not the first time that he saw such an inexplicable ability to get secret information. "Miss Su Li, you are not from the Nanjiang country. How do you know that our enemy is the royal family?" Fang Mu was still a little impulsive. In the face of Su Li's sudden question, he couldn't help but blurt out the question, "Did the eldest brother tell you?" "No," the eldest brother clearly told. Speaking of this, Fang Mu realized something and immediately stopped the second half of the sentence. Su Li was very interested and asked, "What did he tell you?" "Fang Mu, it's not a good boy to say things halfway. What do you think?" Fang Mu subconsciously looked at Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan's mouth twitched slightly. "This boy. Did he deliberately trick him?" "You don't need to say it. I can guess what the explanation is." Su Li said with a smile, "It's nothing more than hiding something about the royal family from me. After all, even if I am powerful, I will never offend a country for no reason. If I know it, I will probably drive you away, right?" Fang Mu's face suddenly turned pale, and Yin Xuedong was also worried. She looked at Su Li nervously with her beautiful eyes. They didn't expect that the relationship with Su Li would be on the verge of breaking just after they went out for a day. Chu Qingning smiled, and his eyes were rarely cold. He shrugged and said, "Since you have laid your cards on the table, Su Li, what do you think about the Nanjiang country?" "I don't have any idea." Su Li tilted her head and supported her arm on the stone. She propped up half of her cheek and said in a lazy tone as if she didn't pay attention to the serious atmosphere in front of her. "You have people you want to deal with, and so do I. Moreover, the enemy's forces are so powerful that I can't face them alone. I can only build forces to fight against them. That's why I've never cared about your origins. It's not because I'm aware of it, but because this is a transaction in itself." As Su Li said, she drew on the ground with a branch and pointed to Fang Yuan, "You help me kill people, and then in return, I help you destroy the royal family of the Nanjiang country. It is a fair deal, isn't it? The calm words passed through the hearts of the four people. Yin Xuedong and Fang Mu felt cold at the same time, as if they could smell the endless blood brewing under the words. No, it's not fair. Chapter 116. My enemy. A dim light flashed in Su Li's eyes, and she immediately chuckled. I don't know. But, have you ever seen me make a losing deal? You just need to know that I will not suffer a loss in this deal. That's enough. Fang Yuan's heart sank. She still didn't want to say it. However, from the analysis of the meaning of Su Li's words, he gained something. At least, Su Li's enemy would not be worse than the royal family of Nanjiang country. Let's not talk about these unhappy things. Su Li sat up straight with a smile on her face, as if the confrontation just now did not exist at all. She said, I asked, with the current strength of the Linli building, what are the odds of winning against the royal family of Nanjiang country? 0. Chu Qingning said the answer without hesitation. He said, the royal family has an army, and the palace is heavily guarded. There are many inborn realm practitioners. Even if we all advance to the inborn realm, we may not be able to carry out the beheading plan. As for the minions of the Linli building, they are even more useless. Qingning is right. Yin Xuedong nodded and said in a deep voice, I have heard in the clan elders meeting that the royal family is stronger than what Qingning said. Our current strength is just a nonentity in the eyes of the royal family. Even if we secretly attack them, we are far from their opponents. You still have some self-awareness. Su Li smiled slightly and took out 4 pieces of thin paper and put them in front of the 4 people. She said, don't think about revenge for the time being. It is imperative to do our best to strengthen ourselves. AO sword skills. Chu Qingning read it out and couldn't help but feel pity. He said, I practice the saber, so I can't use it directly. It can only be used as a reference. Fang Yuan roughly read the AO sword skills, and his expression suddenly became cautious. This was definitely an extremely profound practice method. He boasted that he had read countless sword books in the family, but none of them was more difficult than this one. Hide it close to your body. Su Li took out the Liehua spirits hidden somewhere and took a sip. She said carelessly, if it is leaked, we will all be in big trouble. The sword skills are divine, and people above the inborn realm will snatch it when they see it. It is not rubbish. As soon as the words came out, the 4 people's faces trembled violently. They immediately hid the thin paper close to their body, and then looked around vigilantly. Don't worry, there's no one around. Su Li put down the wine gourd and said with a faint smile, if any of you can practice to the 3rd hurdle of the sword skills or understand the 3rd hurdle, I will try my best to help him break through the inborn hurdle and become a young master. This agreement is valid until you are 20 years old. Fang Yuan's heart couldn't stop beating fiercely. He had already reached the acquired 9th hurdle. If he went one step further, he would reach the peak of the acquired 9th hurdle. He was only one step away from the inborn hurdle. If he could break through the inborn hurdle, he could at least catch up with Su Li and not fall behind too much. Chu Qingning and others also blushed. The temptation was too great. Being a young master was something that they didn't even think about. After all, even in their families, no one could help people break through the inborn hurdle naturally. Everything depended on personal qualifications and opportunities. But Su Li said that she had a way. If this matter was spread to the martial arts circle, it would inevitably cause a great disturbance, and the Linli building would never be peaceful. Yin Xuedong and Chu Qingning looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. Don't think too much. I have no way to help you break through the inborn hurdle. Su Li seemed to see through their thoughts and pointed to their chests. It's the magical effect brought by this sword skills. The 3rd hurdle is a threshold. If you can understand it, it will be easy for you to break through the inborn hurdle. I can help you at most. Where did you get this sword technique from? Fang Yuan frowned and asked. Su Li used to make elixirs to help them practice. Everything she did was constantly strengthening the strength of the Linli building. If she had it long ago, it was impossible to take it out now. Do you remember Jin Cheng Ao? Su Li pointed to the direction of the Qinghe town. Thanks to him, I can get this treasure. It turns out that you deliberately deal with him for the Ao sword skills. Fang Yuan was shocked. Where did Su Li get the information of the Ao sword skills? All the doubts seemed to go back to the original point and couldn't be explained. Half of the half. I'm just getting some stuff while I'm taking my revenge. Su Li chuckled and a light flashed in her eyes. She said in her heart, I just get a little justice for myself. Fang Yuan was silent. The more Su Li said, the more doubts he had. The mystery of the girl in front of him was getting thicker and thicker. The sky was bright. After a good sleep, Mammy Li was full of energy. She got up and heated the dry food for everyone. After eating, they continued their journey. The Qinghe River runs through the whole Dahan country and finally converges into the Donghai Sea. It can be said that half of the people in the Dahan country are raised by the Qinghe River. Xiaowu was very bored on the way, so he told them about his hometown. Our Dawang village is one of the many small villages along the Qinghe River. There are only dozens of families in the village. They usually rely on fishing for a living. Xiaowu said and patted Datian, who was sitting next to him. Datian and I are orphans. We don't know who our parents are. We were picked up and raised by the village head. Later, Uncle Wang, the son of the village head, got married. Datian and I had a hard time. We didn't want the village head to be scolded by Aunt Wang all day, so we left the fishing village. Later, we went to the school to find a job. I didn't expect to meet such a good person as Lecturer Su. Xiaowu briefly talked about his own experience, but deliberately omitted the process from the Wang village to the Qinghe school. Seeing that he smiled brightly, Datian also laughed. He was not as smart as his eldest brother. He usually listened to his eldest brother. As long as his eldest brother was happy, he was happy. They are also poor people. Yin Shuodong sighed secretly, but she didn't have much sympathy. At least Xiaowu and Datian had the village head. But she had nothing before she met Chu Qingning. It took the carriage 4 days to go from the Qinghe town to the Dawang village. During these 4 days, it was not smooth sailing. They encountered many robbers along the mountain road. But those ordinary robbers were no match for Fang Yuan and the other 3 people. They were beaten badly in less than 5 minutes every time, and a large amount of money was extorted. Lecturer Su, don't you control them? Xiaowu and Datian were excited and couldn't help but worry. If they robbed every robber they saw, would they offend too many people? I can't control them even if I want to. After all, they are just escorting me all the way. I am not qualified to restrict their freedom. Su Li helplessly spread out her hands, but she was thinking whether she should rob the robbers around the Qinghe town. Why didn't she find that it was faster to make money in this way before? Xiaowu heard Su Li's words and immediately smiled bitterly. However, when he saw Fang Yuan and the other 3 beat the robbers violently, he felt relieved. When he left the village that year, the only silver he had was robbed by the robbers. Now when he saw them being robbed, he felt indescribable pleasure in his heart. Those who rob people will be robbed by others. This group of robbers can be considered karma. Karma is not good. In such a journey of robbing along the way, they finally arrived at Xiaowu's hometown, the Dawang village, on the 5th morning. Su Li opened the curtain and saw dozens of houses gathered on the flat sand a few miles away from the seaside. They were surrounded by low stone walls piled with stones. Some of the houses were small and dilapidated thatched huts, and some were tall houses made of cobblestones. From time to time, children could be seen playing and running between the houses, which formed a peaceful and harmonious picture. It was indeed a very small village, as Xiaowu said. Grandpa Head, I'm back. Xiaowu and Datian were excited and drove the carriage to stop in front of the stone wall gate. People in the Dawang village had never seen such handsome horses and luxuriously decorated carriage. At first glance, they knew that there might be extraordinary guests in the Dawang village. People in the village quickly gathered around. The children were surrounded by their families, and their faces were full of curiosity. Whispers came constantly, but no one dared to go forward to talk. The village head is coming. Suddenly someone shouted, and the crowd immediately separated to make a way. Xiaowu and Datian looked expectantly, but they saw a short and fat middle-aged man coming from the crowd. Uncle Wang. Xiaowu's expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but ask, Uncle, have you become the village head? What happened to Grandpa? Xiaowu and Datian ate well and dressed well under Su Li's care, and their demeanor and momentum were completely different. When the short and fat middle-aged man heard Xiaowu call him Uncle Wang, he was suddenly confused. When did he have such two promising nephews? At this time, a scream came from the crowd, Xiaowu. Aren't they Xiaowu and Datian who left the village 3 years ago? As the voice came out, there was a sudden uproar in the crowd. Ah! No wonder I find them familiar. They are the two boys adopted by the old village head. Yes, I didn't expect that they would be so good after they went out. Look, their clothes are shining. The short and fat middle-aged man finally reacted. He stared at Xiaowu and asked incredulously, Are you Xiaowu? Xiaowu had no time to talk with the short and fat middle-aged man. He looked anxious and said, Uncle Wang, where is my grandpa? How is Grandpa? Datian was also nervous, and asked in a muffled voice. The short and fat middle-aged man immediately gave a hollow laugh, Your grandpa is fine, but he is old and retired from the position of village head. I am the village head now. You two come back. Then, the short and fat middle-aged man looked at Su Li and others behind Xiaowu and Datian. He was a little discerning. Just by looking at the clothes of Su Li and others, he knew that the identity of the people brought back by Xiaowu was absolutely extraordinary. Hearing that the short and fat middle-aged man said that Grandpa was fine, Xiaowu immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Then he thought of Su Li and others, and immediately scratched his head in embarrassment. He turned back and said, Lady, I am being rude. It doesn't matter. It's human nature. Su Li came forward to comfort him, and then nodded slightly to the short and fat middle-aged man. She said lightly, Village head Wang, please forgive me for taking the liberty to visit you. No. It's my honor that you can come to such a small place as Dawang village. Wang Dafu couldn't help wiping the cold sweat on his head, and his legs were slightly trembling. Since he became the village head, the highest status he had seen was just the village head of a nearby big village. The pressure he felt when facing that person was less than 1/10 of that when facing Su Li. Su Li smiled gently, Village head, don't be nervous. I heard that the scenery along the Qinghe River is good. It happens that Xiaowu grew up along the Qinghe River, so I came here to have a look. I wonder if you can stay in Dawang village for a period of time. I will give you enough silver. Seeing that Su Li's attitude was very soft, and there was silver to be earned, Wang Dafu was overjoyed. He immediately nodded and said, Of course. It's my honor that you can live in the village. I have a lot of spare rooms in my house, which are enough for you to live. Please follow me. Wang Dafu immediately led the way in front, and began to calculate how much money Su Li would give him. A little money from such a big shot would probably be enough for them to eat for several months. By the way, I don't know the identity of that person. After the joy, Wang Dafu remembered that he didn't ask about Su Li's identity, but he didn't dare to take the initiative to ask. He could only hold it in his heart and wait for a suitable opportunity to ask Xiaowu. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.